Good afternoon and welcome to the Superintendent's Workshop being held at the Joe N. Idlet Junior TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. And if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our Executive Assistant, Nancy Esplin. I'd like to call this workshop to order. The time is 12 noon. And Dr. Bohr, the floor is yours to explain the workshop and the agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a number of items to present today, and then following my items, it will be followed by two board member items that were placed on the agenda. Our first item is the Student Code of Conduct, and I will turn it over to Ms. Dampier, but prior to doing that, just want to thank her and her team. They have literally been working since December to capture the intent of each board member regarding our Code of Conduct. This is a policy that you all will approve over the course of the next 2 months. Seek community input, a real comprehensive approach to ensuring that we do have a community standard that is captured in this Code of Conduct. And it has not been an easy process. By no means is this a cut and paste of last year. Things are fluid in the state of Florida, as they should be, as we're being responsive to the needs of our community and students. And Ms. Dampier and team has done an outstanding job of capturing the intent to ensure each and every single student knows the expectation when they walk into our schools. And we've clearly defined systems in place to maintain an environment that allows children to know the rules, administrators to know the rules, and then ultimately we can do what we're charged to do, which is teaching and learning. So Ms. Dampier, thank you to you and your team, and I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, today I will provide an overview of recommended revisions for the Code of Student Conduct for the 23-24 school year. Before I begin, I would be remiss if I did not thank the Student Services team for facilitating many feedback sessions with all stakeholders and for making all the many amendments to the Student Code of Conduct. Mrs. Dowdell, Dr. Crawford, Ms. Bernal, Ms. Ainge, and Ms. Kassenschmidt. Stakeholder feedback is very important. Therefore, over the past couple of months, feedback sessions were conducted to give everyone a voice on the Code of Student Conduct. We really wanted to focus on 4 areas. We heard from everyone talking about the cell phones, bullying, vaping, and discipline expectations. We conducted 3 community feedback sessions to solicit feedback, and we had many board members show up just to, see how that process was working. We had over 55 students provide feedback during our Superintendent Student Advisory Council on those 4 areas, and they really did give us some feedback that we had not thought of. And then during our board briefings this past month, I presented the recommended changes and reviewed all of that information with board members and solicited their feedback to the Code of Conduct. The summary of changes we really refined to increase clarity throughout the handbook and amended behaviors and corrective interventions. To ensure consistency of expectations and procedures, specific guidelines were outlined, and this is the first, in the Code of Conduct for bullying, cell phones, and vaping. For the bullying guidelines, we added a statement. We really wanted to send a message that there was no tolerance of bullying in the school district of Indian River County, and all reports will be taken seriously and investigated in a timely manner. We wanted to make sure our victims were protected, so we also placed in there something new, that a plan must be in place to protect the victim during and after the investigation, to make sure that students were felt comfortable with coming forward to make an investigation and that make a report to ensure that the investigation would be upheld in a timely manner. Administrators, school staff, students, and bus drivers are trained on bullying every year. That's state statute. We do that at the beginning of the year, and we document as such. The bullying investigation timeline that administrators must adhere to for all reports of bullying is now included in our Code of Conduct. Our Administrators are trained on this. They know what the requirements are, that within 24 hours of a bullying report, they must start the investigation, and then they have between 1 and 10 days to conduct the conclude the investigation. And then outcome letters, we must send outcome letters to the victim as well as the perpetrator as well, and also provide the HOPE scholarship information no longer later than the 15 days of receipt of the bullying report. And this is outlined, last year we put together a process and focus that outlines all of these steps for an administrator to follow. So this is something our administrators have documentation on of when and where the bullying takes place and the reports. We have a new cell phone guidelines that we're very excited about that were added to ensure a positive learning environment that is free from distractions. And for grades K through 8, a lot of feedback here between students as well as all stakeholders that cell phones must be out of sight and silenced from the start of the school day to the end of the school day. And that's for grades K through 8. For grades 9 through 12, cell phones must be on silent during school hours and out of sight during class time. We really want our students to focus on instruction when they actually go to class. And for certain unique circumstances for our grades 6 through 12, we have unique activities in the classroom like HOSA, biotech, that a classroom teacher would need to receive prior approval from the administrator to have the students use the cell phones for, during that class period. You will see that a progression of discipline is outlined for minor cell phone misuse. An office discipline referral will be submitted for all offenses with consequences assigned such as detention, aspire, all toss, or out-of-school suspension. And it's progressive to make sure that throughout the process there is parent contact is required for all of those offenses. Any additional offenses above the third offense will result in an automatic referral, of course, to the suspension review team for consideration of an alternative school-based program. We've given many chances of first offense, second offense, third offense, so if it continues, we want to send a message that this will not be tolerated. Also, for our major offenses, we have violations that are considered serious offenses, will not be tolerated, as such as recording and posting fights, cyberbullying, recording, transmitting, and sending messages of students or staff without consent. This is an automatic office discipline referral with an automatic 10-day suspension. Any illegal activities will be reported to law enforcement. This is very serious. We will outline all of this training at the beginning of the school years to make sure our parents, our students, and our staff are aware of this important change. And of course, we're very excited that next year for 2023-24, we have committed through the Sheriff Department and SRD will be assigned to do a full-time cyber investigation. You know, that's been the concern with the principals, that a lot of time to look at, you know, and do a thorough investigation. Snapchat, all of these social media is disappeared by the time you get to it. Well, we have someone who will really spend all of their time looking into this and investigating this, so we can give some consequences for those students who have contributed to this offense. We're very excited that we have new vaping guidelines in our code of conduct. Before, we always had vaping outlined in there, but not specific. We've added specific consequences for tobacco and drug use. For tobacco, we have a progression of corrective interventions were added. Each corrective intervention includes a referral to law enforcement, and they do give civil citations where the kids can go and with their parents and take a class, that actually the parents take a class, like a orientation, and then the students have to complete modules to really reiterate that the abuse that vaping is doing to their system. For drug use, For all offenses, students are assigned out-of-school suspension here with a referral to law enforcement. And of course, depending on if it's drugs, they may be arrested, or for all of them, they're given a civil citation, and it's referred to law enforcement. So it's really outlined for the administrators to really look at all of the offenses. There is no guesswork in what should occur. We've gone over this with the administrators. We've gotten feedback from the administrators as well. So they are fully aware of what's expected as far as consequences in our code of conduct. It's transparent for our parents to be aware of this as well as the students. And then our next steps will be for us to update the Code of Student Conduct training for all stakeholders. That would be our school teams, students, and families. Update policy 5136, which is our wireless communication device. We'll bring that forward with the next volume, as well as policy 551701, which is our bullying and harassment policy. We want to make sure that these align with all recommended changes to the 2023-24 Code of Student Conduct. Are there any questions?
What was that second policy number?
Oh, it is our bullying policy. It is 5517.01. There have been some changes with that. The instructional material training that was conducted a couple of weeks ago that outlines there are certain curriculums that are prohibited from being taught in our schools. And it was pretty self-explanatory, those particular areas. So aligning that information, we went in and removed those curriculums from our code of conduct. And to be on the safe side, we are not going to add curriculums in the code of conduct. If like, for example, CHAMPS or PBIS, will provide training, but because we don't know what's going to be added or deleted, and it just protects, us. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that we went in and we looked at all of the training from the instructional material. I'm going to be sending that information to my staff. It's a course that you can take, 55 minutes. We're all going to take that course to make sure we are aware of what's accepted as far as curriculum, because we all need to be aware of that since we're handling all of the training for mental health, and any discipline training.
I want to thank Ms. Dampierre and the Code of Conduct team. I attended one of those meetings and listened very carefully to the parents and principals. And at this time, I'll just open up for questions from our board members. Start with Dr. Posca.
I don't think I have any specific questions at this time based on our previous meetings. You did a great job answering all those. But I would like to just say that big thank you to you and the staff. And this is, a great example of how we can do things properly as a board, as an administration, get feedback from the community, come up with a policy we can all support, which is, in my opinion, a huge improvement over what we've had before. And it's hopefully going to help keep our kids a lot safer and improve their ability to learn in the classroom. And obviously if we do end up passing this policy, it doesn't mean the work is done. There's always room for more feedback, reassessing what's going on, and moving forward to see what other beneficial changes we can make. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Posca. Ms. Berenborg?
Sure. Thank you so much to your team, especially for listening to board members. And, because we hear parents, we listen to parents and teachers, and I've heard from administrators, all three. And they all have different takes on it. So it's very interesting to hear. But overall, I'm hearing that these changes are wanted. I appreciate that, especially the statement that you put in for bullying to add victims' rights. I think that's really important because, as we discussed, a lot of times the victim is moved and not the bully, and that shouldn't be. So I appreciate that. A couple things I had mentioned, written down and discussed with the superintendent this morning. On page 15, at the bottom, it says teacher must implement 2 interventions, yet the guidelines state referral. So how would they do a referral at the same time they have to do 2 interventions?
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Page 15 at the bottom where it says teacher must implement 2 interventions for the first time they have a cell phone issue. and then it says they need to do a referral. So how did they do the 2 interventions and the referral at the same time?
We're asking teachers to do 2 interventions, and if it's a cell phone issue, they need to follow the guidelines. That's why it says for that particular one, instead of going in and listing, because we went back and forth on whether we were going to list all these different guidelines for them, because theirs is different, we went in and put cell phone, see cell phone guidelines on page 20. So if they had a cell phone, if it was a cell phone issue, they would automatically write a referral.
Okay, so you may want to look at that, page 15 at the bottom, because it says right there, teacher will implement 2 interventions. That's not what we discussed for cell phone issue.
Yeah, for cell phone,
Okay.
we can correct that in
Okay.
between options.
Thank you. And then on page 39, I asked about notes from parents about riding different buses, and superintendent gave me a great explanation about that. You know, in the past, if a parent wanted a child to go home with another child, like for the weekend or whatever, or overnight, and they got to ride a different bus, and parent just wrote a note. Do you want to take that one?
I feel like I'm on. All right. Yeah, that is a practice that we should not be endorsing, because ultimately, at the end of the day, there's no way to verify, is it in fact that student who's giving that level of permission? So it's a liability that we as a system should not be putting on ourselves.
I appreciate that, and I understand that. Thank you. Page 43. It says first offense for dress code. But it doesn't say that they need to change clothes or have a change of clothes brought.
If you want us to add that, but it does say that the principal has the authority to make decisions. I guess that was the whole idea, is that the principal still has the final authority to determine.
I understand that, but if you have a child that's been brought to you for the fact that they have inappropriate clothing, and we don't put in there that they need to have a change of clothing right away, and if they let one child get away with it, it's going to open up the floodgates. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I just want to, we have not had to.
I'm bringing that up to the board.
Yeah, exactly, because I
Okay?
know we haven't really, that wasn't an issue. According to the principals, when I got their feedback, that wasn't an issue on their campus.
It's an issue from parents and students, I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I've heard it.
All right.
That certain students are allowed, they just get a talking to and sent back, and they're allowed to keep wearing what they're wearing, and other students aren't. So I think to be fair and to be across the board, we need to be very clear in that statement. Okay? Page 47 at the top. This statement, students have no expectation of privacy. They have their cell phone taken away and somebody can go look through their entire cell phone. Has that been passed by a legal test?
Yes, as far as if there's anything that is criminal.
I understand that, but the fact that it says students have
think
no
that's-
expectation of privacy I guess that's an attorney question.
Yeah, but I think that may be in I think we may have taken that straight from policy. But you can go ahead and answer that.
Chair, so I do believe that we did take that from your policy,
Let me look.
but with regard to expectation of privacy, as a legal question for law enforcement,
It is.
law enforcement has to, if they are looking into something as a potential crime, has to make sure that they're following their laws that apply to them that have to do with search and seizure. So there are specific things like probable cause that do apply that in the criminal arena that they would have to pay attention to. That's not exactly the same for us when we're just dealing with discipline issues. And even though we say that there's no expectation of privacy, I do believe that if you look at our policies and procedures, we're not just going through people's phones with no reason. It would be based on perhaps catching them doing something, right? Like catching them taping something. And then I think usually what we ask them to do, as opposed to going through the phone themselves, is to have their parent come and we ask them with their parent to actually delete what they had just taped, as opposed to the staff doing it themselves. But I do think it's a good thing to have in there because it does put the students on a sort of notice or warning, you know, that if I'm doing this at school, that, you know, it could be a problem either through a disciplinary issue with the school or through a, you know, criminal issue with the law, and that somebody may go through my phone if it warrants it.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're on legal ground by making that statement there.
It's in our policy. It says students shall have no expectation of confidentiality with respect to their use of wireless devices on school premises / property.
That's different than privacy.
But then there's also, talks about privacy as well. Let me get specifically. It says, including but not limited to those with cameras may not be activated and utilized at any time in any school situation where a reasonable expectation of personal privacy exists. And then it talks about what the attorney said, that there are certain times that if we have suspicion that we can do it like a search and
Okay.
seizure.
I'm just saying that statement, I want to make sure we're on legal ground with that statement.
Do you want me to
Okay?
change it?
Well, I'm just asking. You discuss it with the attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I want to make sure. And the next thing I have is, will teachers and administrators review the important changes at the beginning of the year with new students when they arrive, because we get new students all the time, and at the start of the spring semester? And will parent information nights and communications go out frequently?
I'll answer that, Pam. Through the chair, the answer to that question is yes. So we've created a new onboarding process at the beginning of each school year. We work with administrators over the course of the summer to identify what shifts need to be effectively communicated both to staff at the opening of schools as well as students at the opening of schools, as well as the community at the opening of schools. So we vet that process and streamline it across the entire system to ensure that the appropriate messaging is being communicated. We also replicate that process coming back in January, where we have the same exact process, which is kind of reloading for the new semester or walking into the second semester, reminding students of the expectations, pushing that information out. So this will be part of that process as we upload that information to make sure everyone clearly understands what are the changes and how do we ensure that we're being consistent in the implementation at the opening of the school year. Because if we get this right as we open up the school year, a lot of this will just, the expectations will be adhered to and we'll be able to focus in on teaching and learning. And then when we come back in January, we'll be able to remind everyone of these expectations and continue through.
How about new students?
We have an intake process that we follow at all schools. So as we go through the intake, it's more than just saying, welcome to our schools. It's sitting down through the counselor's office where there is a checks and balance, for lack of a better way of saying it, where you're going through the expectations. So if you're coming into our school from one school, a new system, then that's the opportunity to make sure we're onboarding that family the most appropriate way. Coming from another school, which is typically the overwhelming number of our transfers, we have a significant movement within our system. They already know those expectations, so it's a little bit different depending on where you're coming from. But if you're new to the system, it is sitting with the counselor and going through, this is the code of conduct, this is the information in which you need to be aware of, sign for it, as well as everything else. You think at the beginning of the schools, the plethora of information you as parents have to sign as we onboard a school year. We have to do that while we have the parents at schools registering those kids.
Okay, because I know in the past, it's just been handing the paperwork, and they get a ton of paperwork, and they are expected to read through it all, and then they go to school the next day. So I just want to make sure that these are big changes, and we want to make sure everybody's aware of them when they walk on the campus.
Making these changes, I think, is absolutely moving the system in the right direction. Not effectively communicating these changes is an absolute failure of myself and staff. That will not happen. This has been a long time coming. It has been a process in which we've really taken seriously in order to ensure that we do have this community standard associated with the way in which students will act in our county as it relates to what takes place, the behaviors that are displayed while in a school. So we will be very vigilant in ensuring that this expectation is absolutely 100% effectively communicated, and then the organizational behaviors that will be created are aligned with this code of conduct.
Okay, and then the last thing I have is the video that I shared with you. When will we see some posting of that?
So I've had staff review that, and it's a very good video and a very long video. So what we're working on now is taking the most pertinent pieces out there and kind of making clips of it so our community can digest that information in bite-sized pieces where they can actually sit in small chunks, digest some of that information. So taking all of it, we don't think we'd be able to communicate, have them sit through the 90 minutes. So we're communicating, and we're going to be pushing that out while this is out for public hearing, because some of the changes, as you have referenced, as have other board members, there's a great research that supports the need for some of the changes that we're making in this code of conduct.
Right, because the piece in that video, I think that's the most important for parents to see is the addiction to cell phones.
Absolutely.
That's in there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Berenborg. Mr. Barefoot?
After that, there's not many more questions to ask or comments to make, but I think that communicating with parents, guardians, grandparents, and the like is absolutely critical. There's only so much you can do in a classroom or at a school. Everything starts at home. So the video that gets produced, one, obviously, it should be available at any point in time. The other thing you might consider when you are producing or creating or editing, whatever stage you're at, this video, is a couple of case studies, in the sense that little Johnny or little Mary was found with this or had this problem, and this is how we handled it, almost real-life role-playing. You can probably get some of our students that would be delighted to participate in something like that. That'll make it more real-time
Agree.
and not just a lecture or not just a bunch of slides. That works well for adults that learn that way, and as you might consider that as part of this video that you produce and ultimately put on the website and send it out on a regular basis. Just to, worst case is they delete it. Constant reminders. But other than that, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you and your team have done thus far. I do have a few questions. One of the things that you mentioned on the PowerPoint as you went through it was the effort that the district made to reach out to community leaders, to community members, to be a part of the Code of Conduct Committee, and student leaders as well. I know that there were times where the superintendent met with the student leaders of our district to receive feedback, and of course the board members. But what I didn't see were teachers.
We did have our union president participate, and I think she brought a teacher, but she was the representative on behalf of the teachers. She actually had copies. She participated in the first session, and we got feedback from her for the initial round of revisions, and then we got feedback again from her once we got feedback from the board members as far as the changes, the proposed changes, along with the principals. So that was twofold. And she really gave us some suggestions from a teacher's perspective, which helped out tremendously, especially when drafting the consequences relating to the offenses, as well as, you know, the administrators.
So we don't have, not all of our teachers are union members. So if our union president is speaking on behalf of the union members, then we're missing an entire segment of teachers' voices that may have participated or may have, you know, added to this conversation. I think that's definitely an area of improvement for us moving forward, that we need to make sure that we reach out to everyone. Maybe even bring this forward at a future, and I'm sorry that I didn't think about it before, but maybe even bring this review forward to schools so that they can, at their level, you know, do a full review of the code of conduct with their principal or their assistant principal or in their department chair chair meetings or something like that, so that we can actually get literal classroom teacher feedback, comprehensive feedback, like everyone. If they're interested, of course, you can always, some people might not want to be a part of it. But the idea is to make sure that the people who it's actually impacting in the classroom, which is the teacher, we hear from. And I think that getting one president, one union president, and one teacher who came in with the union president, I don't think that gives us a fair and accurate view of all of our teachers.
And also, by us having the community input, that was another opportunity, but that's good feedback, because anybody can show up for the community input.
I know, but
To give feedback, but that's well taken.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
But
it's-
the community input feedback community committee was really, there were parents on there. There were a lot of, I didn't see any teachers, local working active teachers there. So I think that we need to kind of find another way of recruiting them. And if this if this code of conduct gets passed tonight, and it goes for this
Public hearing.
public hearing,
Request for public.
we still have 30 days to receive feedback. So I'm hoping that if there are any teachers who are listening, that if you all,
Hopefully they're teaching right now. When they watch it later, you see.
when they watch it later, and you listen to it later, and you, please don't get in trouble. I don't want anybody to, just provide us with feedback. We still have time. Provide us with feedback. Provide the feedback to the superintendents and Mrs. Dampierre. Send us all an email of your concerns or something that you want us to either address or add or take away. This is the time when we want to be able to hear from the people that it actually impacts. Yes, sir.
Through the chair, I agree that we need to formalize the structure so you can, as a board member or board members, articulate this is clearly where that information was shared with teachers. So I agree with that. In the same breath, I want to give assurances to the board as we went through this policy in the changes, whether it be with principals, whether it be with the leadership teams, Ms. Basura's team, and looking at it, the expectation is and always will be that you are representing the teacher's voice in terms of what these changes are. So it just isn't speaking from a principal's perspective in terms of implementation. It's going back to your teachers and receiving feedback. What do you think about this? So the expectation is for all of us to have the backs of teachers, which I know for a fact this staff does, is to receive that information. So at the end of the day, teachers will say, this code of conduct has taken some things off of me, which will make my job easier. And I think that's exactly what we'll hear as we move forward. But we will articulate exactly how we're going to get that information in the future.
Thank you. I do have a few, obviously as we go forward. There were a couple of changes since the last time that I saw this that I just wanted to ask some questions on. On page 11, you mentioned earlier that we would still be doing CHAMPS, you said, in terms of the training, but it's crossed off here. And I know CHAMPS is defined in the back as not being social emotional learning or, some unsolicited theory. So why is this crossed off if we're?
We crossed off all curriculum just to be on the safe side, because we don't know what can be added and or changes might happen. So we took off all curriculum because we wanted to make sure that whatever's on the approved list, we will be able to implement those changes.
But we're still doing it?
That still would be an option for schools. We're not requiring, that was something that individual schools may have selected as an intervention, school-wide intervention. So they may still use it. Just like PBIS was eliminated off of the list, we eliminated all of the curriculum off that. That doesn't necessarily mean that PBIS or CHAMPS won't be implemented. We just eliminated it off of the list of listing all curriculum on here, because it could change.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's still a possibility for schools to select a curriculum or a guidance that they can use at their schools that is not a part of this code of conduct?
That has been approved. For example, if we have the list of prohibited curriculum, we are unable to use that. So they will come through our office, that's why we're going through the training,
Okay.
to make sure that that list is acceptable. Of course, CHAMPS is acceptable, just like Kids at Hope is on that list as being acceptable as well. But we will not have an automatic list in the code of conduct.
Right, gotcha. So how are you all communicating that to schools?
That will be part of the beginning of the school training, as well as with the administrators, because we still have to do training with the administrators. Once this is approved, and we will, at our pre-ignite, make sure that whatever curriculums have been approved, that's not on the prohibited list, that we will let them know that they can continue to use that, as well as our school counselors, because we want our school counselors to be aware of this as well.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that. Let me go to the next page. Sorry. So on page 20, something that I mentioned early on in our one-on-ones was the Department of Education's, let me get it. The Florida Department of Education has on their website a,
I'm glad he did it this time.
I didn't follow instructions.
It's a nice ringtone. I like that ringtone.
That's the Ohio State fight song, by the way.
I don't like it.
She don't like it. That's
at
good.
least it's patriotic, right?
Exactly. I apologize.
Do you get an infraction?
Yeah, it's a detention.
I get a detention. I have to go to the
I would-
principal's office.
So the Florida Department of Education has rules for student discipline on their website, and part of their slides that are there, which aligns with our statutes, is a zero tolerance preamble. It is in State Statute 1006.13. Essentially, the one phrase that is shown over and over on their training slides here are the words "zero tolerance for crime and victimization." That's something that I brought up earlier, that I would love to have that supported in our code of conduct. I thought it would be included here, but I don't see it.
It was. You are right, because
Because I see that we've reduced the minor cell phone usage from 4 offenses to 3, which is good, but I don't see this.
I do apologize. I think some of the changes, and this is no excuse, but some of the changes that my staff had made, we think that it didn't click. That's why it took so long for us to, send out there. So that was on this list. I saw it. So, and it was in bold. I don't know where it disappeared, but we realized that late that day I was sending it for, I
That's
realized
fine. Can
all
we
the
add it?
changes.
Can we make sure we add it by
Yes, we can
tonight?
add it. It
Thank
was
you.
on here. And
Okay.
now I'm not crazy, because Mrs. Cashenschmidt said the same thing. She said, I know some of the changes that I caught. She was like, I saw them and I saw them, but when the track changes, maybe when she went in and saved. So we'll add that, the victim,
That's
it was
fine.
on here.
Thank you. That's what this is all about, right? Reviewing.
And it was bold, it was bold.
Then 20 page, let me go, page 27.
Wait, you know what? No. We put it where the bullying section, let me just make sure. What page, I'm sorry?
Page 27,
Oh, we did put the violent crimes, I apologize.
did you?
We did put it on page 33,
33?
yes. Up on the violent crimes and victimization,
okay.
that's where
I see it.
we discussed putting it.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I know it's
Got
on
it.
somewhere, sorry about that.
All right, we're good there. Okay, back to page 27. Under ALTOS, the alternative to out-of-school suspension, there's a word there, recidivism. It's the second bullet down. It says the program is designed to reduce recidivism. I talked about this the last year, and probably even the year before, about that particular word. I mean, the definition of recidivism is the tendency of really a convicted criminal to reoffend, to do a crime again. Recidivism is one of the most fundamental concepts in criminal justice. It's really a word that refers to people who relapse in a crime or relapse in a behavior that would bring them or return them to prison, essentially. I would like to not use that word for our kids. I mean, if we're going to use a word here in our code of conduct,
that's what I'm saying.
we can very easily say the program is designed to reduce repeat misbehaviors. Keep it simple.
And that is correct. We'll align it to the strategic plan. We'll make that
Easy.
change.
Easy, thank you. All right, done.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario.
I'm not done.
Oh,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
done
I
with
thought
that.
you said done, I'm sorry.
Apologize. Okay, page 31. I didn't see this word before. It's all the way at the top. It says interim alternative educational placement. What is interim? Because we either have in-school suspension, we have Aspire, we have ALTOS. What is interim?
And it's for ESC students. We have, it's from statute that we can place them in an interim placement. It could be
Okay.
another facility that's needed because the facilities that we currently have do or do not meet the needs of that student.
But where would we put them? I mean, here in our school district, we only have but so many placements, so what would be the option?
Well, it could be homeschool, if, with the parent. It could be, of course, our prep, or it could be a facility that the parents have agreed to where the kid needs additional support.
So basically the same thing that everybody else is getting.
Well, yes and no. It depends. It's on a case-by-case basis,
Okay.
so I can't make a, you know.
Okay, I get it. All right, thank you for that. Before I go to the next page, on the slide, the school resource officer, school resource deputy assigned to cyberbullying for the next coming school year, it was on the slide for cell phones, but when you go to the definition of cyberbullying in our code of conduct, cyberbullying is referring to technology or any electronic communication, including the transfer of signs, signals, writings, images, sounds, etc., in part by wire, radio, electronic systems, photo, but I don't see here personal cell phones. So how can we clarify what exactly is going to be investigated? Is it school-related electronics, or are they also going to be charged with personal cell phones?
It would be a combination of both. For example, our wireless devices. Like I said, we've had students take video and use fake accounts. And so our principals really don't have the time to go and do some extensive research to find out who, you know,
Yeah, I
have
know.
that skill set. And our SRD department has a department that really focuses on that, so they'll be able to bring that expertise to us. So that was just an example that I listed as such as, you know, cybersecurity. But it would be of any type of investigation that pertains to, you know, that requires us to delve deeper into investigating.
Okay, so here for the definition of cyberbullying, can we include in this definition the words including personal cell phone?
Yes, we'll have to change the policy, because the policy does.
Yeah,
we took this.
we got a lot of
Yep.
policies that we're going to wind
Yep,
up changing
yep,
anyway as
yep,
a
we can
result of
include that.
this.
Mhm.
But that would make sense, because if the cell phone is used for cyberbullying, but it's not included in the definition, I think it would be smart of us to include that in there.
And I think that's part of that bullying policy, so that's perfect.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, page 43, dress code.
Page 33?
43, sorry,
sorry.
43. One of the bullets in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the seventh bullet down, it reads, apparel will contain no sheer, net, mesh, or sleepwear items. We have that now, and kids are coming to school with their pajamas. So we can have all the policies in the world, all the procedures, all the written guidance, but if they're not implemented at the school level, it's for none.
And we'll make sure that that is part of the training. I have written that down to add in the training, the explicit training, that our principals will have to take, and make sure that that's expressed also with the training for our teachers as well.
There's with regard to the sheer and the net, what about leggings that have a sheer side to it? So I have seen leggings, like workout gear, where there is a sheer mesh that obviously goes from the hip all the way down to the bottom of the leg. And I've seen them on school campuses. I know I've seen them in the gym, and, would that fall into, and my initial thought is yes, it does fall within this category of no sheer and no net, no mesh. But if that's not, again, caught at the school level, I suppose that would fall under your training.
Yeah.
We have to have all eyes on deck for these.
I added that. No pajamas, no sheer leggings, just some examples give them some examples, more specific.
Yeah, that would be good. The other thing that I have here, what I don't see, and I know that we've had this conversation before, were no flip-flops. No flip-flops, no slides, no slippers. And I don't see that here anywhere. I thought I remember seeing it in past code of conducts, that they weren't allowed to come in with like beach flip-flops, open flip-flops, it's unsafe, walking down the stairs, walking up the stairs. I know we live in Florida, but what is the dress code policy on that?
The principal, of course, would have the final decision, but we can add that on no flip-flops.
Well, board members, I'll open that up to discussion. My thought for that is no flip-flops. I mean, I understand open toe, but there has to be like a back strap, to secure the foot in the shoe. But no open flip-flop. My belief, my thought, no open flip-flop, no slides, no slippers. I see kids coming to school with pajamas and slides. They're just rolling out of bed. I mean, literally rolling out and just going to school. So I think that kind of attire needs to stop. So I'm almost done, and then we can get the board members' view on those three things. So I would like to see us not have slides, flip-flops, or slippers. The other thing is, I'm going to go to the first offense. I had a suggestion for the first offense, and I have it here, first, second, and third. I know this is part of statute. We're not removing words from here, but I thought with the change of clothes, I had a suggestion, and we can open it up to the board members too. Include, for the first offense, do three things. Because if we're trying to crack down on some of these misbehaviors, this could be one of those ways. The first would be call the parent, obviously. If the parent can come in and bring a change of clothes, great. Then the child changes, and then the child goes back to school, back to class, and the day moves on. If there cannot be a change of clothes, the child would obviously get a warning and a lunch detention. Because I'm not sure we can do anything else at that point except place the child in Aspire for the rest of the day because they're out of dress code. But that's one suggestion. The second offense, if they do it again, obviously, parent call, same thing. If you can come in with a change of clothes, great. If you cannot come in with a change of clothes, lunch detention, and then at this point, the additional response could be removal from extracurricular or sports suspension. And then the third offense would be the same thing, 1, 2, or 3, same thing, parent, lunch detention, extracurricular or sports suspension, and then, of course, number 5 is in-school suspension or Aspire, and then, of course, you can progress from there. But if we provide those options within the first, the second, and the third, we still get the opportunity to say, no, you really need to change those clothes, and the principal still has some of those options in there to choose from in terms of looking at a particular situation quite differently. But I will agree with Mrs. Berenborg on this, that when you have a student who comes in with clothing that is not appropriate, midriff showing, boobs showing, shorts are too short, that's not someone that should be sent back to class. Because we are sending the wrong message to everyone else that this person can just go to the office and then be sent back with just a warning. That's not acceptable. We wouldn't do that when it comes to any of the other violations, unless they're pretty minor. In this case, this would interrupt the educational, setting. So I think if we could talk about those as a board and get feedback there, that might help with the changing of clothes. My last item that is not on here that I'd like to open up for discussion is, I was told within this whole process that Vero Beach High School and Sebastian River High School have a bathroom pass policy that is only, that students can only use 3 passes within 9 weeks. Is that true? Vero Beach too.
Chair, yes, but not by 9 weeks by class. So it's not necessarily you have 3 bathroom passes for the totality of a 9 weeks period. It's by individual class.
So each class gets 3 passes?
Yes,
Each student?
so yes, correct.
So some parents are actually, saying that it's not per class, it is per semester, per 9 weeks, and that some students, some girls, obviously, when they really need to use the restroom, they can't. So what was brought to my attention was that this was a school board policy, because that's what the parent was told. But it's not a school board policy. This is a school building practice. Is that correct?
Well, I'll verify with principals, but just in speaking to principals and being on campus each and every single day, it is by the particular class, and there's always the opportunity where there's unique circumstances in which you work with a student. And to this point, as we began doing at the beginning of the school year, there was concerns, but that's an example of principals being consistent in terms of what they're doing. Students are moving every 40 some odd 50 minutes. So when you walk in classrooms, you're on schools, you see hallways that are empty, and at the end of the day, being implemented with fidelity across the schools. But I'll double check with principals.
And when did this start?
At the beginning of the school year.
So I've had some concerns over it, or, some concerns have been brought to me over this, so I don't know how to verify, other than you walking the hallways, but I don't know how to verify, get student input. How do we get student input on that? I mean, it's great that the hallways are clear, but I don't want anyone to have to feel like they've used up their 3 passes and they have to hold it, you know, or they get in trouble, which I've heard from a few kids.
Through the chair, we did receive feedback, and it was one of the things as we worked through last year, that was just absolutely way too much movement
Yeah.
in the hallways. We went through it again as we moved through this particular year. There's always going to be situations in which common sense has to come into play, and teachers will have to use that common sense. But at the end of the day, there is an expectation that we are here for teaching and learning. And I know that our teachers go above and beyond in terms of being able to act in the best interest of our students. So there is a system in place that is working very nicely, and when there's opportunities that we need to allow students to use the restroom, that's exactly what we do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Ariel. Just a couple statements. With the new cell phone guidelines, just want to make sure this board, the district staff is here for our principals and our teachers, because there will be issues and we will get calls. A cell phone was taken. We've got to support the process and we've got to support the schools. So I just want to make sure clear on that. I like the information, what we have through K-8, 6-8, and then 9-12 when it has permission, for example, in certain classes. I too wish to talk a little bit about State Statute 100613. District school boards shall promote a safe and supportive learning environment in schools by protecting students and staff from conduct that poses a threat to school safety. Threat assessment team may be used alternatives to expulsion or referrals to law enforcement agencies to address disruptive behavior through civil citation, teen court, neighborhood restorative justice, or similar groups. Zero tolerance policies may not be rigorously applied to petty acts of misconduct. Zero tolerance policy must apply equally to all students, regardless of their economic status, race, or disability. Now, when I talk about this, I'm not talking about any kind of major disruption. Fights, disrupting school environment, drugs, we know that. We know the student has to be removed. But what we have been doing, and whatever we end up calling it or what is approved, is bringing people together with parents' knowledge to see if we can solve the problem. We all know punitive has to happen sometimes, but when you collaborate that with a practice, whether it's called restorative practice or whatever you want to have, I think is important. And again, this would be through a parent wanting this. I don't want to take it away from parents who want this. When we used to do it, what we called it, say, okay, if we do this, we might reduce the suspension. Parent knowledge, we have a base. And when they come back, then we don't have as big a problem, because if you bring kids back from just punitive without something else, it's going to come again. So what we want is safety on school campus. And believe me, the first day of school as a principal, you do not have the right to disrupt this environment, period. But in saying so, if there is an issue, we will try to work it back with you, reducing suspension, calling a parent in. Sometimes I knew parents enough that they'd say, I got it, and I trusted them, and it didn't happen again. So when we talk about zero tolerance, I understand. I want every child safe at all times. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, no.
Something else has to be there. I didn't have enough time to get all the data, but I will have it for next board meeting. I have talked to Aspire teachers and what they use, so when the student goes back that they feel like they're going to be safe and they feel there's not going to be an issue. So whatever that is, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it has to be okay with the parents. I got it, 100%. The principal is in charge of that school by state statute. Big, big responsibility. I would not be in favor of saying, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that, you must do that. The principal knows the climate and the culture of that school. And I think, for the most part, this code of conduct gives them that permission, if you will. Again, not talking about major disruptions. I don't think we go into the detail. I was here when the first code of conduct book came out. I see some former principals there. I'm looking at the book. You know, I'm looking at the book. What do we do here? What do we do there? I knew my students. I knew my staff. I knew my parents. And they all knew I expected a safe learning environment. So we have got to trust our principals and our teachers and our staff members and our bus drivers, because this is important on the bus too, with cell phones and everything else. So I'm not in favor of saying you do this, you do this, you do this. But at the same time, we make sure, because we have students who are suspended and the parents work really hard with you to get that reduced, or what can we do? I guess, Ms. Dampier, that's my one question I have. We've got to have, by state statute, these alternatives. Will we have them?
We have character education, which is outlined. Our curriculum division has instruction on those character ed, like respect, kindness. Those are things that we're really going to focus on with our school counselors for next year to combat some of this behavior. You will see a lot of, and all the offenses, as far as the interventions, it says parent contact. We really want to partner with the parents and have them as a part of that conversation, along with our school counselors as well. So there will be some correction, but not programs per se that are not outlined, that have we been told that we cannot use.
I'm not talking about programs. I'm talking about students who need help.
Yes.
And they need to talk, whatever
Yes.
you call it.
Yes.
Maybe the suspension's reduced. I'm not talking about a program that every
Yeah.
child has. I'm talking about, how do we help these students?
And that is a part of the process. That's why it was important that we put parent contact as well as our school counselors. And our school counselors, that's why we have them in K through 12 now. We didn't have them at the elementary level, but we have those people in place and folks in place to provide them with those strategies to be able to help our students and our parents. And so a lot of training is going to happen and occur with our school counselors, because they have had programs, and we're not going to be utilizing those programs. We're going to be utilizing strategies to make sure that our students are able to come back and be able to, interact and be able to follow the expectations and rules that we've outlined in our code of conduct.
But I want to, just to build on what Ms. Dampier says and give every assurance to the board, where we are being explicit is where absolutely we need to be explicit on the most egregious offenses
Right.
that harm children.
Absolutely.
The level of flexibility for principals, administrators, counselors to work with students and parents to address those behaviors, to keep children in classroom and to keep children understanding which behavior is leading to a negative consequence, whether it's a negative consequence to myself or to others, and then provide them with a deeper understanding as to what behaviors don't lead to harm to others or self. That's non-negotiable. And you're right, 100%. In programs, specific programs that are fine today but are not fine tomorrow, in some ways takes the level of really addressing and defining what I'm going to do to meet the needs of this specific child, which may be different and not 100% aligned to one specific program. We need the ability to understand what is the reality in which this child is living, and how do I partner with the parents in order to provide an environment so the student can be successful. That's not going anywhere. We need to continue to do that. So every assurance to all board members, we're not walking away from meeting the individual needs of students, both in the classroom as well as in the hallways. We need to create environments in which children can be successful, and we can't punish away maladaptive behaviors. We have to educate, we have to partner, and we need to increase a student's understanding of the impacts of decisions that they make, that they have on themselves as well as others.
And again, I'm not talking about a curriculum we're putting out there with standards or anything
Right.
like that. I'm talking about when two students fight, and before they come back, what can we do to help them?
100%.
With parent permission.
Yes.
And again, that is the key there, because if we don't, it could just get worse at school, and I've lived that.
Yep.
Let me think, I have one more thing, and then we can. I talked about not having the direct options as a principal, and I'll have more data, because I know we've used some programs in Aspire and LTOS, because I've talked to the teachers there, and those students really need something before they go back into the mainstream, my feelings. All right, any other discussion, board members, on this topic? Ms. Bear, oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Berenborg, and then Mr. Barefoot.
Okay, so Ms. Rosario brought up flip-flops. I'm going to tell you that I remember distinctly that there were not allowed flip-flops for a while because of insurance. Somebody steps on the back of somebody else's shoe, they're going to go forward, and they're going to hit the ground. I remember flip-flops were a big no for a while, so I don't know how that even came back. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there because it was an insurance issue. I agree. What message are we sending to other students when we allow somebody that's breaking the rules to continue to break the rules the whole rest of the day? Because if somebody comes to school with pajama bottoms on, and you call the parent and they say, I can't get up there, that's, you're going to have to just live with it. Well, they are your responsibility. They are your children. I understand, because I've made those phone calls and I get that response sometimes. But what's the call there for the principal?
So-
And that's on them.
100%. And the reality is, and I can go back from when I was a principal, the expectation is at the beginning of every class, all 6 classes or 7 classes or 8 classes, depending on the number of classes you have, as kids come in, you check the dress code. So dress code should be done first
Right.
period. At
Right.
the end of
It
first
should be.
period, everyone's in dress code. Now, me, and I'm not the easiest person to work for, but any teacher who sent a student down second period or third period, the first place I went to was the first period and the second period teacher. Because the reality is you check it once.
Yep.
And then you're done for the day. Now, of course, there would be opportunities when you would shift or a student came from this class, I was dressed this way, then this way. But the reality is, if you're not enforcing it through the entire day, all you're doing is sending a message that you don't have to be in dress code. So
Exactly.
if I received a warning first period and then was sent back to second period, all the children in second period and every student who was passed in the hallway would say, well, they don't really mean that because look at so-and-so. So the reality is it needs to be done once. And there is a level of consistency that we need to absolutely expect. So having it on paper, that's great, that's wonderful, but we need to ensure that it's being done with fidelity for each and every single day of school.
Okay, I hope that helps. I know that, with this new cell phone policy and the dress code, we're asking principals to crack down, and teachers. And we're supporting this crackdown. And they need to know that we expect them to do it. And if they crack down at the beginning of the year, we all know, those of us who have been principals, if you enforce, or even a teacher in the classroom, if you enforce your rules, the expectation is there for the rest of the year. But as soon as you let that rule get bent or broken, it's gone. I see a lot of head bobbing out there, so they know what I'm talking about. That's the expectation I have as a board member of our administrators on these policies. That we are all voting to say, let's crack down on this stuff. We want that enforced. And when I walk on a campus and see this stuff, it bothers me that it's being allowed. So I'm just letting you know that I guess I'll just have to walk on campus on second period then. I do know about the 3-pass rule, and I did question that in the fall because my own daughter went through that problem with a teacher, and her grade was being marked down because she asked for more passes. Yeah, well, we got that taken care of. But I do understand that kids are meeting up in the bathrooms. They're on their cell phone, hey, meet me at 10:04, get a pass, I'll see you there. I know that stuff's going on because I witnessed it at Vero Beach High School when I was walking the campus one day. I was really with an AP that said, just a minute, I got to go check on something. Sure enough, that's what was happening. So I think I understand the crackdown on that, but I do also understand the fact that, kids may need extra passes or whatever, and hopefully we're allowing some of that stuff, especially for, medical or health issues. What is, Ms. Stampier, I'm going to ask you this. What is St. Lucy's cell phone policy for all their schools?
They're not allowed from the beginning to the end. They must
Even
be
their
out
high schools?
in high schools, yeah.
And not that we want to follow everything that St. Lucie does, but they have one of the top 5 schools in the state. So I asked, what does Lincoln Park do? And that's what the expectation is for a high school. So my question is, with all these high school fights, especially when I hear about the flick, and kids are pulling out their phones to videotape, if the expectation and the principals are, we can't control that in the schools, but yet we're adding an SRD to help them with that. How come we can't help them with this so that we can crack down on all the social media problems that are happening that cause disruptions in our schools? Why can't we crack down on even high school cell phone policy?
So as we went through and received feedback, we really looked at where the root cause of the problem was coming from. Middle school students have really demonstrated the lack of maturity in terms of knowing when to use these phones appropriately and not appropriately. And it was pretty consistent across the board that there has to be opportunity to help students understand how these devices should be used. So in middle school, we thought it was absolutely appropriate to say, based on the number or the frequency of incidents in middle schools, it is a very doable thing in which we can build that level of expectation. In secondary schools, or the high schools specifically, by adding the teeth to the non-negotiable zero tolerance, we're able to address the behavior. And as you said yourself, once you address those specific behaviors, then ultimately students will fall in line. And having the ability of the resource. So in speaking to the principals, are we looking at where best to address the behavior? I think this code of conduct captures that.
So now that they have this extra support with the SRD, there's a fight breaks out, a bunch of phones come out, and I've heard from the administrator's part is, I have too much to do and handle with the investigation. How do you expect me to go and look in video and find all these kids with their phones out? All you have to do is make one case. One case. And everybody finds out what happened to that child that was videotaping another child and put it up on Snapchat. It's illegal to put that up there without a parent permission, and yet it's happening all the time. So to crack down on that and to give them that support, let's get this SRD to help them with that
yes.
when there's that situation going on so that we can stop all this craziness. And I'm hearing about it with the flick, especially what happened last year. Okay, and then I agree, punitive and education go hand in hand. What are we in the business to do? Educate. So we have to educate. We can't just throw away the key. And, the principal runs the school, yes, but if you'll get the same discipline with the same expectations. And the discipline is out of control. And the only way we're going to get it under control is to get these rules a little stricter, but the follow-through has to be there. And if they're not willing to do it, find somebody else that is. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Barrenborn. Mr. Barefoot?
This is, when you, Ms. Dampier, when you were having these sessions, did you include, or were any people involved from the Boys and Girls Club, GYAC, Crossover Mission, the programs that actually work with these kids oftentimes after school on weekends?
So many people, we had so many people there. I can tell you the first night, I don't recall, did we have any? Did we have anyone from GYAC or Crossover Mission? The first night we had off with SAC, Substance Awareness Committee. From where? What? Yeah, Ms. Corbin, who works with community schools through Children's and Family. We did have it open for our first session. We had almost, I think, over 50 people that were in attendance for that first session. We did have a lot of community members here for that. Our second and third session sort of dwindled down a little bit because we did cover all of those 4 focus areas and gathered feedback at that point. But no, we didn't have anybody specifically. However, the people that were on there, community members from before, and we posted it on our website. So we didn't call specific agencies to
Well,
say.
I think,
Yeah, we did have someone from GYC. Yes.
yeah, because my suggestion was going to be when we put this out, to be sure and get our proposed policies into the hands of these organizations in the community that deal with kids, because they're going to be in a position to reinforce. I think this is it's not just us and it's not just the parents, but a lot of parents, and I'm familiar with Boys and Girls Club for sure, they really depend on these organizations to, in some respects, obviously they're role models, but in other respects, I don't want to say substitute parents, but they are the adults in the room when those kids are in these organizations. So I think including them or advising them or seeking some comments would be a smart move.
Okay. I have that written down.
Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Dr. Jones, you mentioned something about data, that you don't have the data. What data were you referring to?
I was just looking at the information that we use in Aspire and Altos on whether it's restorative practice or anything that works with students, so to see how that has worked or reduced suspension. So I've been looking at that.
But I have the whole stack of all of the data here. Did you not receive this?
Which one was it?
Aspire, the Aspire program. All of the Aspire teachers have to log in all of the
ma'am.
data of all of their students on a day-by-day basis.
When did you receive that and by whom?
A couple of days ago, last week,
From whom?
I requested it. From Ms. Dampier.
Yep.
For this particular meeting, to be prepared for now to have those questions, which, by the way, is a good leadway. I'll let you respond, but then I wanted to talk about this.
No, ma'am, I don't have it.
Me either.
I'll make sure you get it. It was not on purpose. It was information pertaining to the Aspire, just particular questions.
Yeah, because I requested the Aspire data, which is exactly this. And what's interesting is you'll see, it leads me into this next conversation or this next question, and I'll ask probably Dr. Moore to respond or Ms. Sampierre. The original intent of Aspire 2 years ago when we started Aspire was so that there could be a place for students, kind of like an in-school suspension. But it wouldn't be used as a period by period, you do something bad in this period, go to Aspire or go to in-school suspension for just that period. It was really intended to be an all-day thing, an alternative to out-of-school suspension, basically. Somehow or another, that's changed. So I'm going to ask Dr. Moore if he can talk a little bit about the original intent of Aspire and where we are now with the Aspire program, because, well, I'll open it up to you first, Dr. Moore.
Thank you. Through the chair, the intent of Aspire is to keep children in school while at the same time provide them the opportunities to receive services through the school to help them understand what behavior landed them in Aspire. And looking at it very similar to the dress code. If you don't have the appropriate dress code, we need to get you in the appropriate dress code. But sending you back to class sends the message to the school culture or the school environment that nothing happened to me, the student who would be out of dress code. So as we receive feedback from principals on what is the absolute best use of how to use this intervention, principals have the autonomy to say you'll be in there for the remainder of this period or that period or for a day or two, while at the same time having the opportunity to address behaviors over the course of time. So there's a lot of flexibility provided to the administrator in terms of how you use this resource to help modify behaviors, while at the same time keeping a expectation across the totality of the school so everyone clearly understands that there is a consequence. So the feedback on that modification from principals has been absolutely, this has made their lives much easier. It's allowing students to understand there is a immediate consequence for behaviors, while at the same time maximizing the time that they're in class. You're able to provide the consequence, have it help the student and get the student back in class. And I'll also say, just as we're having the conversation, I'm going to tell you right now, the work that our principals have done over the course of this year to improve the environments in schools has been significant. It absolutely has been significant. Are there opportunities to improve? Yes, the answer to that question is yes. But when you look at where they were last year to where they are this year, so much better. So I want to acknowledge that rate of growth, while at the same time acknowledging we, from a systems perspective, have to have a high expectation. So as we're being critical on what we're seeing, it's not to take away the efforts that principals have in place. There's clearly opportunities to improve, but we can't walk away from the efforts that they've made in terms of walking campuses, students in classrooms, the structures, the fights in comparison to this year to last year, drastically down. Still opportunities to improve. So what we're seeing in our schools is progress, and we'll see even more progress next year when we improve this code of conduct.
So when you receive this packet, board members, you'll see what's interesting in there is that there's an array of infractions, anything from cursing, verbal altercation, vaping, there's a lot of vaping, dress code, tardies, detention, failure, tobacco use, skipping, being insubordinate. There's one here that says, I told my teacher, what's up? I don't know how that ended up in Aspire, but there's a lot of different infractions. What I find, though, is that many of these, and of course this list doesn't include student names, so what we don't have here is a list of how many of these students are repeating the same behavior and still being placed in Aspire and not getting the next Altos or something else. Like, what is the progression? At what point, and this is what is not clear anywhere, is at what point do we say no more Aspire? Like, what is that cutoff? Because it doesn't seem to be anywhere. So who makes that decision as to how many times you can be placed in Aspire before a subsequent consequence is given?
The administrator.
The administrator?
It's based, yes.
So we can have kids go into Aspire 10 times until an administrator decides? I mean, there has to be a cutoff. We have to be able to say that's way too much.
We do not have anything documented stating that, but we have given the principals the flexibility on a case-by-case basis, because each case is different, depending on what the incident is. And again, this goes back to what Dr. Jones says about knowing the students, knowing, whatever is happening in the student's life. It could be a pattern of repeated behavior, and the administrator knows that maybe something is going on at the home, et cetera. But it is left up to the administrator to give the consequence. Same thing with Altos. We don't say, you can only give so many days, you can only give 10 days max of.
Yeah, I know, but I think there needs to be more support, more structure there, maybe a minimum or a maximum. Like, you can't do more than a certain number of days. I mean, at a certain point, we have to look at the school year. How many times is a student going to repeat the same behavior and still only get the same consequence.
And it could be
You know,
what-
there needs to be some kind of guideline there.
And
That is one of our goals within our district's strategic plan. So we do look at that. Is the modification, the behavior modification actually having the impact that it should? So it is one of the criteria within our strategic plan. As you recall, that was where we debated what was the appropriate turn you referenced earlier. So that is looking at, is that program being successful? So having the opportunity to get to the student quicker versus tomorrow you report to indoor suspension, they call it something different here, requires too much time in between the display of the behavior versus the actual consequence / intervention being provided. So we're trying to accelerate as fast as we possibly can at school sites. What do we need to give our principals in order to address the behaviors that are keeping children out of class, that would keep children from not being safe? So I'm telling you, abundantly clear, we need to trust our principals. And we will look at, if I'm just, which I think is what Ms. Rosario is trying to address, I'm going to send Mr. Barefoot, probably a good example from when he was in school, to the indoor suspension 25, 30 times and just kind of push him off. We're not helping that kid or Mr. Barefoot. What we're doing is pushing away the kid and just go get out of my hair. That's not cool. That's not someone who makes a 6-digit salary who's going to be able to maintain their employment. But that's not the case. We live, eat, breathe, drink, and sleep in these schools. And this is, and you heard me say it all the time, the best job in the world, but also the most complex job in the world. And the environments in which I was a principal, my last year being a principal was 2012, versus what it means to be a principal in 2023. Even though I was in an inner city school, man, it's night and day. It is different. So we have been very aggressive at looking at interventions, getting the opportunity to improve interventions to help modify behaviors. 100%. Opportunities for us to improve is dress code. I don't think anyone could shy away from that. We have to improve. We have to be consistent, and you set the expectation on day one, and you enforce it all day long. And when you enforce it all day long, it says, I think Ms. Berenborg just said it, it becomes very, very easy to do. That is an opportunity for us to improve, specifically in our secondary schools. I 100% agree with that, and there's only one person to blame, because you're the board, and that would be me. So we can modify that, and we don't, be honest with you, we don't have to wait until next year to do that. We can do it consistently over the course on a daily basis, and I think there is opportunities to do that. So when you're looking at the interventions that are in place, we do listen to our principals. We do look at the consequences and what are we doing to be as nimble as we possibly can be in order to get the appropriate consequences, as well as the opportunity just not to have a consequence, but to learn from the consequence so the behavior doesn't repeat.
Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
So the other thing that I wanted to mention, something that we discovered was a concern a few months ago when we pulled up one of the ODR reports. I forget exactly which one it was, that most of the infractions, a lot of them were insubordinate. And you couldn't actually identify which one were cell phones and which one you were insubordinate. Why? You were insubordinate because you had an attitude that day, or because you just refused to do the work, or you had yourself, like what was that insubordination? So are we changing the system so that these specific behaviors are now going to be able to be checked off? Yes,
Yeah.
I see.
Yes, I can tell you feedback. Previously, we used to have everything listed, and then feedback from the principals, can we just have a catch-all? Now we know that we can't be specific and target that data. Now we're going to outline everything that was added to the code of conduct as far as cell phone offense. Bullying, all of that will be updated. It will have its separate code. We're working with IT to make sure that that happens. So once this is approved, we get with IT and make those changes. We've already, we're going to include some principals in that as well to make sure we cover all the specific areas. We've already been working with some of them. I know Ms. Dowdell and the district team have started working with some of the principals to make sure that we're getting feedback, what should be added, what should not be added as far as a code, because we want to make sure that we can really use the data to make decisions. And we found out even with cell phones, Dr. Pashka asked for that information. We were like, okay, we have cell phones, but we don't have it separated. Is it cyberbullying? So we're, just from that feedback, we're going to make sure that we can get data that we can make some instructional and behavioral decisions on more specifically.
Great minds think alike, because I was just going to suggest, can we have multiple options for one offense? So if a student uses a cell phone for cyberbullying, for example, can that one offense have both cell phone checked off and cyberbullying? So this way, when we are pulling up the data, you can see how many cell phones were used for cyberbullying, or, you know, any of the other things that you would use your cell phone for. You know, classroom use, cell phone use, classroom use, or cell phone refusal, or, you know, something to that effect, refuse to put it away, or refuse, so we can see a little bit clearer what was actually used and why for each infraction. I don't know if we can do multiple.
Yes, I think you mentioned that in our individual meeting.
I think I did. I don't remember if.
And Ms. Cashin-Schmidt said we're going to do it on the back end, which is
Okay.
behind the scenes.
Okay.
I know we're working on that. We have gotten a lot of feedback, and again, when we looked at the cell phone, we could not give specific information about the cell phone. So we do know that there are areas that we need to be
Yeah.
more specific.
Yeah. The other thing that I had was for the Hope Scholarship. I thought I saw the Hope Scholarship mentioned in here.
It is.
Where is that? Because I can't find it now.
It's on the timeline
For bullying?
for bullying on here, on page 18 at the bottom.
I'm on 20.
If you look at the bottom, it says the Hope Scholarship information down at the bottom for the timeline,
What page are you on?
page 20. Sorry. My oversheet said,
I see the timeline.
I said the track changes. The 11 and 15. Do you see the bullying at the bottom where the,
Yeah.
at the bottom it says days 11 through 15?
Oh, here it is.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So can we have in the back a definition of what that Hope Scholarship is? Something with maybe an asterisk, so that people know, so parents know when they see Hope Scholarship, they know exactly what that means. What we don't have here, and I've had conversations with some parents lately who have had no idea what the Hope Scholarship is and what it's for. And I think it's important, if we're going to include it in here, that we include what it is and why it is mandated. So we have had some situations, one that has come to me most recently, where there was a bullying incident and the parent did not receive any Hope Scholarship information, even though it was mandatory to provide. And for those who don't know, the Hope Scholarship allows a parent, kind of like a voucher, works as a voucher system, to attend another, could be another public school, could be a private school, could be an alternative of the parent's choice, to go to another school and receive services if their child was bullied in some form or fashion. And I'll share with you all some numbers, and this is why I think it's very important for us to don't disregard the Hope Scholarship or the Family Empowerment Scholarship. So some data that I received from our district, which I think would be important for us to kind of keep in the back of our mind, is the growth of these vouchers and this voucher system of parents leaving our school system to go to a private school. And I think moving forward, there's new legislation that might even allow some homeschoolers to use some of these scholarships. But The family empowerment scholarships used in this district in 2019 to 2020 were 92. So 92 parents utilized the family empowerment scholarships. In 2020 and 2021, there were 81 who used the family empowerment scholarship, and then 75 who used the McKay scholarship. And look at the increase here. From 2020, 2021, there were 81 family empowerment. In 21-22 school year, that shot up to 373 families. 373 families utilizing the family empowerment scholarship, and then an additional 64 using the McKay scholarship. In 22 to 23, which is this school year, 554 families have utilized these scholarships, these vouchers. That's a lot of vouchers. Those are a lot of families that have left our school system to take their kids someplace else because of bullying. Or some of these could also be for reading, tutoring, or for some other reason why they've just removed their child from, it could be ESC services, it could be a lot of different things. You're right, let me take that back. Hope is separate. The Hope Scholarship is a separate. But for any other purpose, it would be 554 this school year. And the projection for next school year should go up to about 691. Now, that's just the projection, could be more. 691 families next year utilizing the family empowerment. The Hope Scholarship, which is specific to bullying, in year 21 to 22 was 17, and in 22 to 23, it is now at 45. So it's still a lot. It's still way more than we should have, and I'll bet half of the students, the kids who have been bullied and have not had any resolution, those parents maybe have not even heard of the Hope Scholarship, of their opportunity to go someplace else. So once they start hearing about it, they are entitled to receive those scholarships to go someplace else. The problem with the state of Florida now is that there are so many of these scholarships that are now going to be available for pretty much everyone who is interested, but there might not be enough schools available, enough options for school choice. That said, it's one of the reasons why I think it's important for us, if we're mandated to give this information on the Hope Scholarship to parents when there is bullying involved, we should include the definition of what that is, at least end with a link, so we can let parents see that within our code of conduct. The last thing that I'm going to mention and ask about is this new memo that came out, and I don't know if this would fit within the code of conduct. My guess is it doesn't, but it might fit somewhere else, is the HEROES program. It was a memorandum that went out to the superintendents on March 10th. It might be very new, but it's helping emergency responders obtain support, which is HEROES program. It apparently it's not new. In 2022, there was a bill that was passed that stated a public school may purchase a supply of opioid antagonist naloxone, I might be pronouncing that wrong, from a wholesale distributor, or may enter into an agreement with a wholesale distributor, I suppose, and have this medicine available on school campuses. Yes, that's what it says.
Yeah.
So what is this? Where is it? Does it pertain to us? Like what?
We, as I recall, as a part of the health plan, that was one of the questions that was in there about do we provide opium and all that, and we do not house that on our campuses.
But our SRDs.
But our SRDs,
Okay.
they can administer it.
Okay.
But we
and
do
they
not.
ha- They have it.
Okay.
We do
Yeah.
not.
Okay,
And they're always on campus.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
So some I'm sorry, Dr. Jones.
I wanted to wrap up with one thing.
I just
You go ahead,
I
Buddy.
just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to clarify. As the state increases on a yearly basis the percent of scholarships that are available across the entire state, that is the same rate of growth that we experience. So Ms. Rosario pointed out the 45 that we have for bullying, and as that number has grown, the projection of almost 700 next year is a increase based on the allocation provided from the state. So and there are multiple opportunities for families to access those particular scholarships. But what's important to know, that is money that is absolutely taken out of the hands of the public school system and pushed into wherever that student may be accessing his or her education. So when you look at our enrollment, one of the things that you'll see is we actually slightly increased in enrollment last school year, while at the same time absorbing the 300 or 280 that went into the choice programs next school year. But as the offering from the state continues to grow, the students who will choose to participate in that program, both locally and across the state, will also continue to grow. So we need to do everything in our power to say the most appropriate place or a powerful place to educate your child is in a public school. And we got to be able to sell the great things that are happening in our school, because there are great things happening in our school. So we should embrace the competition because that's exactly what it is. It is choice at the absolute highest level. And we want to ensure that we as a board and we as a district staff and principals ultimately understand the power and the choice of a public education from a district-operated school.
Hey, just to wrap this up, just a comment. You know, now I found out it was Dr. Posca asked about the cell phone. Good question. And that, Ms. Dampier, that information came to us, just like when Ms. Rosario asked for something. Please share that with us, because that's information I would want to have. And I've seen that go out. A board member asked, so you send it out, and that's fine. It's just that we need to do that. I really want to reiterate what Ms. Berenborg said. We expect these things to happen, but we are here for support. We expect these things to happen as far as the code of conduct and cell phones, and it's going to be tough. We expect it, but we are here for support for our principals and our staff. And a little comment about what Dr. Moore just said. We are in an era of school choice. We all know that. But I, too, as a member of this board, I am here to serve the 14,500 students in our county, and we will continue to do the work we need to do. You know, Dr. Moore is a CEO and runs the day-to-day of the district, and the principal's the day-to-day of the school, and the teacher's the day-to-day of the classroom. And it is harder than it has ever been. But you're right. This is competition, this is choice, and we need to continue to do what we do. And we are on the next one.
Madam
Oh,
Chair,
sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I don't think we came to a resolution on the flip-flops, the slides, and
Do you
the
want me to
slippers.
comment for the dress code? Did you want all of us to comment?
Yes, we can do that. I think you were talking about, so what were the questions and resolutions you brought forward?
To put on the dress code, no slides, no flip-flops, no slippers, with an open back.
I can comment.
Okay, Dr. Posca?
I mean, in general, I don't like the idea of policing our kids' dress code and what they're wearing. Obviously, we do need to have minimum standards. And more importantly, when we do have those standards, we need to actually implement them. And I think that's probably the biggest issue of the discussion here, is just making sure there's equal implementation at every school on a daily basis. Specifically to flip-flops, I wouldn't want to limit that personally. I think it's an important thing for a lot of kids to be able to wear what kind of shoe they like, and I don't really see much of an issue with that.
Ms. Berenborg?
I just brought up the insurance issue, because I know in the past, flip-flops are one of these things that some years are in, some years are out, and the year they were thrown out, it was because of an insurance issue.
I don't recall an insurance issue. I know we did attempt to negotiate with our union regarding the liability of flip-flops from a work standpoint, not necessarily the code of conduct. And I think it is
Well, I remember it coming up because kids were stepping on the backs of other kids' shoes. And they were starting to fall and get hurt, and then the parents were like, well, you expect me to pay for it when you didn't enforce the rule?
No,
So
you are correct.
it was an issue, I remember that.
I'm absolutely not in agreement with this. We have a lot of changes that are happening. Choose your battles. Not only will you have a revolution, you'll have a rebellion from students. And I agree with Dr. Pasca.
I'm fine with it. As long
You're
as
fine
it's-
with putting it in there?
No, I'm fine with it if we don't do it, but I just wondered about the
Okay.
insurance problem, because kids were stepping on the backs of the other kids' shoes. If that's not happening anymore, I don't know, they're moving on to other TikTok things, so.
So
That's
no.
not nearly as fun as the other
So
issues.
3 of us no. Mr. Barefoot?
I'm fine that you can go too far.
Ms. Rosario?
No, I already gave mine.
Okay. All right, so,
It's fine.
Thank you.
all right,
Board.
thank you so much. Okay, here we go, next one.
Next two items will be presented by Mr. Fagan. And Mr. Fagan, you're up, followed by Mr. Bass.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, through the chair, to the board. We have again the item to increase the purchase authority limit for 2 vendors. CDW Government from $1 million to $1.5 million, and United Data Technologies from $1 million to $2 million. We have some things to buy before the end of the year, and primarily also to be in preparation for the beginning of next year. We want to make sure that we have all the equipment and all the supplies that we need and services between these 2 time loans, that we do not impede any opening of school. For UDT, I have about $500,000 in interactive panels. These are replacing the old panels that are in several elementary schools. And also, if a panel goes down in a classroom, instead of trying to fix what's there, we're replacing with this panel. So eventually, we'll get to district-wide interactive panels. We also have about $250,000 for laptops, because we know we're not going to get them all back. They're going to be damaged. They're going to have to be sent off to be cleaned. So this gives us a little bit extra inventory. And then we also have some AV equipment for replacements and some other stuff that we need to have on the ability to buy from UDT. For CDW, we have several things to purchase from them before the end of the year. We have the media furniture for the Sebastian River High School, and I have a couple of slides for you. We also have some monitor replacements we purchased from there, software as we need through the end of the year for the district. And as also, we use them for technology services. We don't necessarily have all the skill sets we have in-house when something breaks, so we contract out, and they provide us with excellent services for that. And I'll show you a couple of slides. So, just a couple, 3 slides up on the top. You'll see on the left, that is the current Sebastian River in that glorious pink, which is a beautiful color. I love it to death. And on the right is the
not the
potentially
school
new
color.
colors we're going to go with. Blue,
Which is the school color.
school color, absolutely, love it. Notice the books on the shelves, and the pink walls. On the right, you've got the soft seating. You've got modular seating. You'll be able to move it around. And what's next? Okay. Then you also have the seating where you would go get a book, come sit at the table and read it. On the other side, you have high top desk, and you have some soft seating. And I graduated high school, I believe, somewhere in the mid-'70s, and I'm pretty sure the picture on the left is exactly what I left. Sure, I'm probably a couple of Vero Beach graduates through here can probably say that was the same furniture that was there when they went through there. Also, once again, soft seating. What you see there is also an area for some a little bit more powerful computers. This will allow the children to come in. One, it's also going to be open during lunch. We're going to actively engage them to come during lunch, sit at the tables, do their work. And also, it's going to be highly technology rich. They're going to be approximately 4 to 6 panels where they'll be able to hook up at a table, do some interactive work in teams, work in groups, either on special projects or assignments that they have to. Any questions?
Board members, Ms. Berenborg?
I just have a comment. So we've come full circle on when I got in trouble sneaking food into the library, to the point where they can actually have, there's going to be coffee in there, right?
Coffee, yes, ma'am.
I can't wait to go for coffee and a snack in the
Similar
library.
to these squares, so that if they do get damaged, we can peel and replace versus having to replace them.
I think this is wonderful. It's going to allow kids to want to use this facility and want to be able to work together in groups. Thank God we're starting to really think like what they do in the real world, is work in collaborative groups. So thank you.
Any other board member comment, question?
This transition's been going on in colleges for years. It's about time
Yeah.
to be caught up with. We're 15 years behind the curve, maybe more.
Okay, next item is an
Thank you.
amendment to increase.
I'd like to comment.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
haven't commented. Can you put that picture up again, please?
Ronnie? Can you go to PowerPoint? There you go.
So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful setting. It's a beautiful room. I'm assuming that those chairs, those tables are at height level for wheelchairs? Can wheelchairs get into those little spaces?
Yes, ma'am, I would feel 100% confident. Yes, everything there would be ADA compliant.
So the one thing that I don't see, and I mentioned earlier, was, because otherwise this is it's a redesign of our current room, library, which is very needed. It's very necessary. There are some areas in there that I love. I love the computer station. I love that little area for clubs and like after school extracurricular activities. They can meet there and discuss, and small classrooms can get there and have small lessons going on. I love that. What I don't see, and what I've mentioned before, is ESC, special furniture for our students who have sensory needs. So if there is a student who, we want to have, who has autism, for example, we don't have sensory bean bags or sensory chairs or something of that sort within this layout that would address the needs of a lot of our students. Obviously, we can't look at just the students that we have currently in this year. We've got to look at the students that are coming in next year as well. So how can we accommodate some of these pieces of furniture, or, remove some of these and replace or add, and make sure that we have, kids cocoon, some, little reading area on the floor, something that is more comfortable to kids other than sitting at a table or sitting on that, I don't know what that blue thing is called, a blue bench, which is wonderful, and they're great, again, but, kids, they want to sit on the floor, they can read on the floor. Where can we accommodate those needs in this space?
So through the chair, I'll take an attempt, and Mr. Fagan, feel free to add on. In terms of buying furniture, I think we're going to address everything in which you just said. So this is just the request to buy that, but this is furniture that would be stackable. This would be furniture in which we could look at to say, is it warm and welcoming, and is this something that would stimulate children? I think we could do that. You mentioned bean bags. Sure, we can add bean bags, whether it's, allowing students to sit on the floor. We want this to be a warm, inviting space for all children, that it's open from sunrise to sunset or bell to bell. So I'm more than confident that we'll be able to accomplish that. This is not necessarily a sensory room. That's something, as we all know, which is significantly different, but have an array of furniture that allow all students to feel comfortable. Almost, I can select this piece based on my need. I think this is going to allow us to do that, and we can continue to look at that and bring back to the board what that furniture would be. But I'm comfortable, based on the flexibility of some of the things that we're adding here. The design of the room will constantly change, and the access to how this furniture can be used provides multiple uses on how it could be used.
So is this a request for just furniture alone, or is this going to be a request for other items like a 3D printer?
So this is a request to extend the amount to purchase the furniture, which we'll finalize in the coming weeks. Did I say something wrong?
Carpet too?
Okay. In terms of technology, we will continue to grow technology aligned to the programming of schools. So as you see those stations there, very similar to screens in current offices or current media centers, a student could move one of the desks over that, called a collaboration station, and throw their laptop screen over to that device right there, and they could begin to work collaboratively. In terms of a 3D printer, if there was a course that had that in the confines of the school day, once they were trained, we could do it there. We have the flexibility of adding programs in the media center aligned to what's happening in the confines of the school year. What this initial phase would be is the reinvention of the space, making it a collaboration space, making it a warm and welcoming space, and then continued conversation. So the district, the system is never in this space again where you have a library. Mr. Fagan was joking, but Dr. Jacobs graduated from Vero Beach Sebastian River High School. Milo Thornton graduated from Sebastian River High School. Our sheriff graduated from Sebastian River High School. That's the furniture they sat in. And these are all people in prominent leadership positions in our district who graduated a really long time ago. So as we continue to invest in the space over time, that furniture is easily replaceable, and can continue to be modern as we move forward.
And what would happen to the old furniture?
Mr.
Which
Fagan
is
can answer
still
that.
usable, it's in good
Through the-
condition.
Through the chair, it'd be offered to any school who may be able to use it. If not, it'd be surplused out
Surplus
and auctioned out.
auctioned.
Yes.
Fire sale.
Can we donate it?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am, could. If we had someone who needed it, yes, just like we've donated buses before.
Or, Mr. Fagan, you just said it could also go to one of our schools if they needed it, right?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
At what point, when do we make that decision?
We will not be loading furniture, so the scope of work, we will have assessments in this space after we return from spring break. And then we will begin the flooring immediately after the school year ends, and then start loading furniture as we get closer to the opening of school. So we could, we'll look at that as the school year opens, I guess.
So you're supposing that this is going to be completely done by August?
We don't think it's going to be done by the opening of schools. No, I think we're going to be still loading furniture and going into the first month or two of school until it's completely up and running, yes.
So what about the books? What about usage of the library while it's under renovation?
We'll have to make a plan on that, because once we become closer, I'll know the exact date in terms of the length of time in which the media center would not be open. Maybe a portion of it would be, so as we get closer to it, we'll design a plan. It does not mean the media center we won't have access to it. We will. We'll have to figure out what that plan would be and the length of time that we'd have to implement that plan. So depending on when furniture arrives, how quick we can get it loaded, but we will have a comprehensive plan in place, so when school opens, there is access to a media center.
And where are these funds coming from?
Through the chair, capital funds.
Capital. So you're asking for an increase to the capital funds for this particular purchase?
Not an increase in capital funds, but an increase in the purchasing authority
In the
out
purchasing
of capital
authority.
funds for these two vendors.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? All right, Dr. Moore?
Still Fagan.
Next item is approval for an amendment to increase purchasing authority for legal services. Currently, we have a contract with Stiffen and Smelman for $250,000. This includes all board fees and also any litigation. This is an increase to go from $250,000 to $350,000. You may say, well, Ron, that's a pretty large increase. Well, in actuality, it's not. In prior years, you were probably spending $500,000 a year on legal services between your board attorney and litigation. Currently, right now, we've been able to consolidate all litigation and board services through Stiffen and Smelman, and therefore you're not paying two firms. Plus, in the prior year, your board attorney's fees were almost twice as much as your current one, so you're saving approximately $150,000 to $200,000 a year in cost avoidance.
Board members, questions?
I guess
Mr. Barefoot?
one question I have,
I'm sorry, Dr. Posca, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are there any other legal fees that we pay? For instance, for litigation, do we pay hourly rates or is this contract all encompassing on our legal fees?
This contract is pretty much all-encompassing legal fees. Now, you do pay third-party for workers' comp insurance, but
Okay.
if you have a litigation
Mediator.
directly against the district for something, we would contract directly with Stiffen and Smelman.
Okay.
And if I can add, the hourly rates by the current firm are significantly less than the prior firm and the other firms who submitted responses back when we renegotiated.
Okay.
Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, where did the $100,000 come from? I mean, we just renewed our contract in November 30th, I think it was, November 29th.
Currently, right now,
We're just entering into our fourth month in the year. So where do we justify $100,000 more?
okay. We have a contract in the PO issued to Stiffen and Smelman for board attorney's fees. That's valued at $11,000 a month. So you have that money encumbered. The balance of what's been encumbered up to $250,000 is litigation. You already have active litigation up to $248,000.
Well, we've been in active litigation.
Oh, that's true.
We were in active litigation last year and we didn't go over.
It's because you had multiple firms. You have one firm now.
Who did we have last year?
You had firms such as Gould Cooksey, Hush Blackwell, Fisher and Phillips, Ackerman LLP, Allen Norton.
I think we should receive all of this before we approve the $100,000.
That's the wish of the board. If you get another litigation, then you
Yeah,
can't
that's
engage them.
Sorry, what
We
did you
can't
just say?
approve
If you
something.
get another lawsuit and we send it to Sniffles Mellon, then we can't engage them because we'll be above the PO limit.
That's fine.
Generally, when you get a litigation, there'll be, say, a $25,000 initial PO to say, we're going to set this up for $25,000 for this litigation, pending receipt of bills. We couldn't issue that PO.
But here's the thing, is that, now it feels like we can't do, because now you're hitting that threshold once again, and you're coming to us at the last minute without providing this information previous to today so that we can be fully prepared to have this conversation. I mean, today, literally, I don't know when board members had a briefing on this, but I only had less than 5-minute briefing on $100,000 today. And then none of that backup was provided as well. So it's just smart of us not to invest $100,000 unless we know what we're spending it on and why, as we're just into the 4th month of the school year. Now, I'm not saying that it's not, that we shouldn't. I'm just saying it's smart to allow us that opportunity to do that research,
Okay,
to
Mr.
receive that research.
Mr.
I don't
Barefoot.
think the research is relevant at all. This is standard business practice. You're just asking to provide the district with the flexibility should it be needed. And if there's a lawsuit that has to be addressed and we need to hire a law firm that specializes in that particular area, then you'll have the ability to do so. Standard practice in this expense line and many others.
Through the chair, there's only 3 months remaining in this fiscal year. So you all approve a budget from July 1 through June 30th. So you approved this allocation of spending last year. And as Mr. Fagan explained, you're still saving over $150,000 to $200,000 when you look at what you were allocated with the old firm, and it outsourced all of its litigation versus having an internal firm that does not outsource its litigation. So at the end of the day, if we were still outsourcing, this would not be a request. But anyone can sue us. We have zero control over who decides to file a lawsuit. The fact that we stay internal or work with the same company, the same law firm, is the reason for the additional request. So at the end of the day, you as a board are providing a cost savings in terms of what you negotiated with this law firm, and us keeping it with one firm kind of streamlines the work. So you should have every confidence that the money is available. We're still going to end the school year in a very, very positive place. Mr. Fagan is very fiscally responsible. But at the same time, we need to be able to govern and run the school system. And we can't control what happens tomorrow.
Ms. Berenborg, or
Sure. I asked that question too, why 100,000? And you gave me a really good answer. We've paid more than that before, but it just went out piecemeal to lots of different companies
Correct.
because Suzanne's firm didn't cover a lot of these, whereas our new firm does.
Correct.
So I totally understand why you have to now come to us, because we're looking at one firm covering it versus doing a little bit here and there, which you wouldn't have to come to us for.
Correct.
Mr. Fagan? And then
And if I
I'll go
can
to Dr.
clarify, this is all just authorization to increase.
Right.
No more litigation comes in, we don't need to issue another PO, then I don't do anything.
Let's hope.
A small one comes and it's only 10,000, then I only use 10 of the 100 requests. It's just precautionary in case something happens.
Thank you. Dr. Pasca?
I'm
You
good.
good? Yeah, I'm good as long as we're not spending as much money. I know we're saving some money compared to last year, and I think about if something did come and we couldn't react, what will that cost us? So I'm good with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bass, you're on the clock.
Noon, have a few items here for you. The first one is extended day summer camp. Our fees, well, each year we bring these fees to you for your approval. The fee structure did not change from previous years. It's going from extended day will be held at Liberty and Rosewood, and it'll be from June 5th to July 28th.
Any questions on our extended day program or comments, summer camp?
Just, I heard it was really good last year, and I'm hoping it's just as good this year.
It will be.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Long.
You're going to do a really good job.
And thank you to everyone who works with this program. I see the cost cuts for employees and what it can do for children as a grandmother, and I know who grandson going to daycare. We do a really good deal here for our summer and especially our after-school program. So thank you very much, ladies.
I have a question. What are the services that are provided for students with ESE, with special needs in our summer school and then in our after-school programs?
Through the chair, we do have staff there that will address those needs as they can. There are some students that may not be able to come to the after-school programs as much as they would like because of the severity of their needs and not having staff that can appropriately deal with them. It's not that we're not trying to find staff to get them. There's just no staff who have stepped up and to take that on.
Have we recruited? Have we looked for? Have we really made an effort to get someone to provide those services for students as needed?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
So is it appropriate to tell a parent, sorry, you can't have your kid here
It
because
is not appropriate to say that.
it's tough?
Yes.
It's heartbreaking.
Yes, ma'am.
So what can we do to fix that? I mean, there has to be, if this were in the, obviously within the school, the parameters of the school day from 9 to 3, from 7 to 3, we would have to find a way to fix it. Why are we not?
It would be part of their job description, and we would hire people specifically for that. But
So-
the problem is getting those individuals with that special skill set to commit 3 additional hours a day, 5 days a week
Well,
to
what
be
would
there.
it take?
You know, they're getting paid, and that's not even incentive enough. So I don't know that I can answer that for you, honestly.
Can we engage in more conversation about this? Because there's a big need.
Yes, we
There's
can.
a really big need. And I don't know if the board needs to have, you know, another future conversation about it, but something has to be done. Because I hear it all the time. I can't have my kid in an after-school program, even the summer school, because they don't provide the services for my kid. Now I don't know what to do. I can't get childcare. I'm a working parent. It's heartbreaking. And I wish I had an answer, and I wish we as a district were working harder to support these kids. Over and over, I hear students with special needs are not being serviced the way that they should. And this is just one of those areas that it's
So-
killing me.
So just as a point of clarification, there are students who their IEP drives summer services, extended summer or extended school year. 100% of those students are provided those services. So that is part of our summer programming. That's not necessarily the item in which Mr. Bass is presenting. We run a business. We run an after-school business, and we run a summer day camp business. So there are two things: extended school year, in which we do in fact meet the needs of those particular programs for our students. The concern or additional conversation in this particular arena is, are we able to provide the services for those students who attend and have their IEP services met during the confines of the school day? But how do we think creatively to address those specific needs so we don't have to turn students away for the extended program? Okay.
Well, for both, for all, not just for the extended. It's extended and summer.
Well, summer, if it's written in their IEP that they have extended summer school,
But that's what
then yes, that is provided
But
to
that's
those
what-
parents.
That's what we're talking about is all.
No, ma'am, I was just presenting the extended day program.
Okay.
That's the extended school year program. It's a different program.
Okay, all right, I get it now. All right,
Thank you.
so we're going to brainstorm more ways to
For the,
increase.
for the extended day, particularly for after school during the school year.
Okay.
Because that's where that issue arose.
I hope so.
Any other board member? Ms. Berenborg?
So I'm not sure if it's after school, during the day, whenever it is, but I've had some parents of gifted students approach me and say, what else can we do to really target and move those kids in their giftedness? And, you know, we think about the lower quartile, we hit the middle all day long. And I'm hearing about some of our gifted programs. Like I had one parent said her child's bored in the gifted program. It's because, and I went through this with my own son, that wasn't his giftedness, but that's what we offered, so that's what he had to do. When are we going to actually address how we're going to get those upper level kids really challenged and unique? Like, you know, I complained about science fair and that we didn't have a lot of participation, because I have seen when you really challenge that upper level echelon of child that, you know, has that capability to think like we can't even pronounce the words they talk about in the science fair. We need to do that. That's our future you know, our future depends on kids like that are going to move us in the directions that we need to move. So we need to make sure that we're not getting them bored in elementary school, middle school, and then of course high school. So what are we doing for those opportunities? And one thing I heard is specifically was about summer program. They said, oh, it was nice that there was a robotics program, this and that. But are we bringing those parents in to ask them, what is it that we need to do to help your child maybe be more challenged creatively? Have we done that? Are we asking those parents?
Through the chair, I can start, and then Mr. Bass can continue. So I think we've done a really good job over the years, still work to be done in looking at the programming being offered both after school and during the summer programming. And upon my arrival, it was 100% not necessarily aligned to the standards. I think under Dr. Long's leadership, we've done some significant work in looking at what children are doing during that specific time, offering both enrichment activities as well as remediation activities. And I think as we move into the summer, you'll still see activities continuing to grow. And if we have the opportunity to have students under our supervision, then it just behooves us not only to provide a fun, interactive experience because it's summertime, but to ensure that there's absolutely no summer slide. And summer slide impacts all students, whether they are a level 5 or a level 1. So providing engaging programming to them at a level of interest and engagement for them is exactly where we need to continue to grow.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask for, in a future workshop, if you do a presentation for us on gifted programs and what we're providing.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. So just as a level of clarity, gifted programming or summer programming?
Both.
Okay.
How gifted kids are being challenged, how our
Got it.
top-tier kids that we need to not be bored and not just relax, but keep going and challenging them as well.
Good
I know
idea.
we're constantly worrying about, you know, our other kids, and I get that. We don't worry about those kids, they're doing fine, but they're not. You know, we need to push them with where they need to go to.
And I don't want to mislead the board. You're 100% accurate. The data is abundantly clear in terms of the lack of level 5s that we have
Right.
here. That data was clear upon my arrival. Obviously, the pandemic has had significant impacts across the state, but we need to grow and not teach towards the middle. So it is providing engaging, innovative programming. That my response to you is just not after-school programming, but making sure that 4s become 5s and 5s remain 5s, and we don't see a steady degression of higher-level kids as they move through their time with us. They need to actually continue to grow. So that is a priority.
And I guess my suggestion would be to meet with some parents of gifted kids and get their feedback, because I heard some stuff that I think would be great for you to hear.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
Any other comments? Board members, do you need a 5-minute break? You're good to go? Okay, you're good? Okay. All right, next, Dr. Moore.
Still Mr. Bass.
Yeah, I could potentially be done in 5 minutes here.
I mean,
So-
they won't be.
So next item is charter school service agreements. Same agreements as the previous years. This is for North County Charter, Imagine, Sebastian Charter Junior High, and North County Charter. I thought I just said that. In River County Charter High, sorry. Any questions?
Board members, any questions? I just have one, Mr. Bass.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I talked to Mr. Fagan a little bit about the charges here. I'm on the Federal Relations Subcommittee for FSBA, and one of the topics we had with our lobbyists just Friday was nationwide never having enough money for transportation, and then ESE, IDEA. And Mr. Fagan explained to me a little bit about charter school and how we charge the student less than 2 miles and greater than 2 miles. But what is it that we can do as a board or a district to get the money in there that we spend for transportation? What is it we can do? Because every year, we never have enough. Mr. Fagan?
You'd have to get the state to change the formula
Okay.
to basically cover cost of school choice. That if we're providing transportation because we want to expand school choice to have every student have that option, but they live further than 2 miles and it
Right.
costs me more because I'm driving more, they need to change that formula to where they compensate us more. If I'm driving more miles per student, then they need to increase that coverage.
And what is the estimate for falling behind in transportation this year? How much will we be short?
Approximately $2 million.
Ooh. I think Ms. Berenborg's going to Tallahassee.
Yes, this tomorrow.
But that was a topic nationwide, Mr. Bass and Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Those two topics. And when we talk about ESE, we talk about summer school and summer programs and what we need to do. It's just,
That's been a topic since 2001, since I've been
I know,
involved in
buddy,
it.
we have not made it yet.
And
All
I
right.
think it was before that, too.
Thank you, Mr. Bass.
All right, I have a bonus item for you since we are on transportation. Did have a job description that's going before you guys tonight to approve, and want to explain that to you. There's we have an individual, and I'm going to go ahead and give him a little shout out right now. Richard Trammell is retiring in a couple of months, and if I did my math right, I believe Mr. Trammell has worked in the district for 48 years. Wow. He is the service center manager over at Transportation. Because of his longevity, he has salaried out of the job description level that he's at. And so the other individuals that he supervises have also crept up, and I guess it was never changed or never really addressed because Mr. Trammell had been here so long. We want to move that job description salary schedule from a C to a B, which is roughly a base increase of $5,000. That's, just something more there as a nugget to attract a qualified individual. That's going to be a hard position to fill because Richard has done a tremendous job for the district. So that's coming for you tonight. I apologize, it was not on the workshop agenda. Any questions?
Mr.
on that one?
Barefoot?
And one more thing. It will be a savings to the district even with the move up.
You're going to, the plan being to promote from within? Or,
Oh, we're open it, yes, sir.
yeah, so increasing it to what, by 5,000 brings it to what level?
That would bring it to base salary of 65, top at 76.
Good luck.
Yes, sir. You're right.
Richard Trammell has saved this district thousands and thousands of dollars by keeping those buses running that shouldn't be running. And looking at, I talked to him just a year or so ago about the longevity of a bus and what we need to do. He will be sorely missed.
Just put it in perspective, he started April 23rd, 1974. Wow. So that's pretty impressive.
Thank
All
you.
all right, next item I've got, which was on your agenda, the fish certification, again, something we do each year, basically ensuring that the data in our fish database is correct. We bring that to you guys for approval. Mr. Westenberger and his team, once again, have gone through, and any changes that need to be made, they've made those. Any questions on that one? And then the last item is the Glendale Cafeteria final payment to Summit Construction. Per Florida statute, you have to hold retainage money out. This is that final retainage. Briefed you guys on it earlier, I guess a couple of months ago, $91,673. It is budgeted within the capital funds, and it is there and just ready for you to sign off to pay that final draw.
Questions or comments? Thank you,
Is-
Mr.
I have a
Ms. Rosario?
Is this expansion going to include, is it just the kitchen area expansion?
It was-
Or is it going to include like a renovation and?
It was a
new
seating,
look?
it was a seating area, new look, made it a little bit bigger.
Done.
Also, it was the serving lines and the kitchen area. And it's done, it's completed.
It's good.
Madam Chair, that completes or exhausts my items. Back to you.
Thank you. I do have the next item, board members, parents on the book committee. I've had several questions about this from the public, so I wanted to bring it to the board. A couple board meetings ago, we reduced the number of people on this committee for instructional materials and media books from 11 to 9. We now have 5 parents and then 4 district people. And, before I voted on that, I thought to myself, that is fine. We want to have the input from everyone. Having more parents is fine, no issue. And the board obviously agreed. Now, when we put our names forward, I just didn't know if there was a little bit of confusion here. But right now, obviously in our district, we have 13 elementary, 4 middle, 2 high school, 1 alternative, and then 1 exceptional program. And obviously the people will be receiving the training or have received the training before this committee begins. And I just wanted to make sure that the parents that were chosen are members or their children are in our school district. And for people who may not know, and I have visited 4 of the 5 charter schools in the last month, House Bill 1557, the Parental Rights in Education Bill, and House Bill 1467 does not apply to charter schools. So when we're making these decisions, these are for the library books in our media center. So Dr. Moore, I just wanted to confirm that all the people chosen, and I do not remember the names, have children in one of our 21 district schools.
So I've been able to confirm with 4 board members, and then Ms. Rosario still would have to conform her 5th. I was unable to find the name she provided as having a student in a district-operated school.
What did you say? I'm sorry, what did you say was not for charter schools?
House Bill 1557, the Parental Rights in Education Bill. Florida state statute relates to concerns district school powers, which finds Florida charter schools exempt. House Bill 1467, the K-12 Education Bill, choosing library books and classroom learning. This is something that does not apply to Florida charter schools. So I wanted to make sure the parents that we have are from our 21 schools because they'll be making decisions for the libraries in our 21 schools.
And so what's your question?
Is your parent, does she attend one of our children, attend one of our 21 district schools?
She attends a charter school, but I'm happy to change that.
That would be great, because I've gotten several questions on that, and I said, I don't know.
But our policy does say a student with a parent in the district. I'm sorry, a parent with a student in the district. It does not say a district-run school.
Ms.
But
Fairborn?
I think I actually brought that up for clarification in the last meeting. I asked, is it district-run or district? And I think you were
The
going to look
language is
into
not.
that, right?
No.
Through the chair, in that meeting, you did ask that question, and that was the response. But we did, Ms. Rosario made a recommendation to the board that we align the language across policy and statute to say a parent of a student in the district. And then you asked a clarifying question, whether that means the parents would have a student on the committee. I was asked a very similar question. I said that district operated in a district school to me mean the same thing. But Ms. Rosario said she's happy to change it, so I think we're good.
But we don't have a book committee.
No,
We don't have a book
there's,
committee. First of all, we don't have a book committee. So this is written on here wrong, because we don't have a book committee. We have an objection committee that we've approved, not a book committee. Big difference. So a book committee can vet books, be a part of something else. We have an objection committee that was not on here. So I think that needs to be clarified as well. And something else that we mentioned when we're putting agenda items on, that there should be more than just the title so that we can prepare for the conversation. We've talked about this before in order for board members to be readily prepared to have a description on here of something, backup or something, so that we can prepare.
Can I?
Yes, Ms. Barrenborn.
When is this group going to get any sort of contact? Because I checked with mine,
Me too.
and she said she's not heard a thing about what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to meet, when they're going to get training, that sort of thing.
Through the chair, we just 2 weeks ago modified the makeup of the committee. So obviously, the district representative was cut in half, so I wanted to make sure that policy passed. It just passed. Then we have this conversation that we're having right now. We do want to convene this committee. So after today's conversation, I'll circle back with Ms. Rosario, identify that individual. We need to train those individuals. We have not received or the need to convene the committee yet, which is a good sign, but obviously we know that we will. We want to have them fully trained, so when there is the opportunity for them to engage in the work, they have been trained, they've normed on their process. We'll have to notice all of those meetings as well, so that takes some time. So we'll be able to begin to engage with them in a very short time frame.
And then the other question I have is, like, the parent I chose has one in elementary school and I think one in middle school. Do we have any parents that represent high school?
Through the chair, that's not necessarily in the policy, so I don't have that particular information.
I'm just
I don't know.
curious if we do. Okay.
I do not know.
Okay.
I can check.
But I don't know how that would, may I?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't know how that would make a difference. I mean, every parent is selected by a board member.
Correct.
So, but I understand the representation on there, but, I mean, there's nothing you could do about it. It's individually chosen by a board member, and that's it. But you don't need to circle back with me.
Okay.
I'll just pick Laura Zork as my parent of choice with a student in the district, in this school district, and is a high school student.
There you go. Good. So I will reach out to that committee tomorrow. I also will have to notify, just out of courtesy, I want to notify the board because my team is being, ultimately, our team is being reduced. So I'll send out who is the complete makeup and their assigned position. So each member, parent that you selected, as well as who's going to serve on the district committee. And I'll work with Nancy in getting notification out so we can convene and train this committee. Thank you, board.
But I'm sorry, may I ask another? We haven't had any challenges.
Through the chair, no, we have not had any challenges, but I still want to train them, go through the state's training that has been provided.
I
They're
know,
gonna
but I'm
have to
just
norm.
asking. I know, I got
Okay.
that. I'm just asking if we have had any challenges.
Not since this meeting started.
But have we already begun the weeding process of those books?
Through the chair, we're weeding at the high schools. Well, the two high schools, keeping in mind that the FLIC has the FLIC is also involved in that. So yes, they're in the process. They're not complete yet, but they are in the middle of going through that process.
And the weeding is of the amount of time that a book has been circulated, correct?
Through the chair, yes. So we're looking at the criteria that the state provided, the condition of the book, the checkouts of the book. And as I've said in previous meetings, the weeding process for us will be larger than most. You should anticipate a larger number of books at Sebastian River because of the new design, but really creating a criteria so that we're looking at on an annual basis. So, yes.
What about the middle schools and the elementaries?
Middle school, we wanted to start with the senior high schools because we knew both of those projects were coming in, and we wanted to implement and work with those teams really to kind of norm on the process. And then on an annual basis, as we close out the school year, which should always be in place, provide that information. So it's happening at all schools, and we're removing items and replenishing with current up-to-date items.
So recently, there was a news conference with the governor, which I'm sure has been circulated around, about the book hoax that has been, at least that's what it was titled, it was the Book Hoax News Conference. And the interesting part about what was mentioned was a question that came up in terms of the timeline for doing the weeding of these books. And the governor's response was, look, this bill was signed into law a year ago. It should not take this long to go through a weeding process. And so my statement, and I completely agree, and my statement would be, our middle schools shouldn't have to wait. We shouldn't have to say, no, we're going to do 2 schools first, and then we're going to work on everybody else. It is policy, it is statute. As of last year, it needs to be done. So why are we giving some schools priority to begin the weeding process and not others? I have not heard of that in any of our conversations. That's new to me.
Through the chair, I don't know that we're giving one school priority over the other.
You just said you're starting with the high schools.
Yeah, no, I can rewind the tape and hear it as well. We very strategically went through the training and made sure, okay, let's begin the process. What's pending and getting it done with those 2 particular schools was, in fact, that we're going to spend a lot of money to renovate and bring technology into those particular spaces. I'm more than confident what we're doing in our school system really should be a shining light in terms of really not only looking at the books that are in media centers, but being intentional about the space itself, so it is a warm and welcoming space that all children would like to attend. So I'll circle back with team in order to see when exactly all other schools are in that particular process, unless I'm saying something inaccurate, Ms. Becerra.
Am I on? You are largely accurate in your description, but we have started that process in the middle schools as well. All of our schools actually are going through the annual weeding process.
Thank you.
We are spending more time, more deliberate attention on the high schools, though.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Because of the
Yep.
process.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
What she said.
Anyone else? Ms. Baser or Dr. Moore, how many books have been weeded thus far?
So I don't have that information in front of me. We could provide the board what we have. I know they are not complete. This is a big lift in terms of the volume of books that we've had at those particular schools. We can provide the board with that information, unless you have it readily available. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. I have the next item. And this was on the agenda, and it's talking about a new policy. And just to comment on the last one about the parent book, I sent the information to Ms. Dampier and Dr. Moore and how it was worded. I just went with it. It wasn't intended to say something that shouldn't have been said. Okay, after the board voted on the February 27th meeting to place a racial equity policy on the April 24th agenda, so citizens could have time to review and give input before the board voted to repeal or not repeal. There was a lot of discussion before that with board members and many citizens. I thought of everyone who spoke and listened to them again, and they spoke with passion, commitment, and concern. The policy before you, Safe, Respectful, and Inclusive Education, was created after listening to board members and many citizens from our community. Knowing that policy needs to align to state statute, work with Dr. Shafty to have this one for the board today. It was said a couple times on February 27th that there are many policies we need to pull together and bring it all together. So I wanted to present this to the board today for input and then community input also. Obviously, there could be some changes and ideas, but I believe the foundation is here. To review the timeline, I sent it to Dr. Moore on Monday, March 6th, and he reviewed with board members during your board briefings. It was posted afternoon of March 6th along with our workshop and board agenda 7 days ahead of time as requested by protocol. The first question that I think people may ask, not only from the community but from the board, is this a legal requirement? Do we need it? Not legally, but I think it's very, very important to have it because it shows collaboration and good intent. And just like legally at our last meeting, we added certain parts of the Parents' Rights in Education Bill into our policy, and it is already in state statute, but the board voted to do so, and we all know that state statute trumps policy. This racial equity policy was voted on 2.5 years ago by the last board, 5-0. But now we have issues with certain words and certain terms. But I do know this for sure. Our intent as a school district and as a board can and must never change. Can never change and must never change. We are always here for our students. In fact, in policy, it states the responsibility of the education of the students in the school district lies with the board. On our dais, we have transforming education to inspire and empower all students to maximize their full potential. And it's in our strategic plan. So after listening to board members and the public try to capture their intent and bring it together, and again, heard it several times, let's bring these policies together under one policy. Concern about repealing the equity policy until we have something else. I thought about this, maybe this board and the citizen collaboration could be a real beacon as we move forward with making sure that we serve all students. Now, if you look in the very first part of the policy, it talks about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This is, many of you probably know, that was signed into law by President Johnson in 1965 and was actually part of the Civil Rights Law. And then it was amended and remeasured when President Obama signed the ESSA law, Every Student Succeeds Law, in 2015. And both of these are laws giving all students equal opportunities, federal law, and had bipartisan support. And as you move into the letters A through E with the subgroups, it is consistent with ESSA, with all the subgroups listed: race, disability, English language learners, lower quartile, economically disadvantaged. This could be a policy that every district would follow. And then you go into an important paragraph noting the federal desegregation order, which is law. And you all know we're working on that as we speak. And hopefully, with key performance indicators, we can have unitary status at some point. So then I thought about this after our discussion. Would like Dr. Moore to ask people in our community, put it on our website, send it to our PTAs, send it to our SACs, our ESE parents, Hispanic, Black, white parents, disadvantaged, just to get input. I think it's real collaboration. And as I stated at the last board meeting in my motion, let us get something together as a community. Before I ask for input and ideas, concerns, questions, I don't know, I just think it's something like this that we need to do as a board when we're thinking about any policy. I have a real concern if the racial equity policy is repealed without something to put in place. I know that we have to follow state statute. I know that we have to follow law. And I know certain terms cannot be in this policy. But I ask that you just consider this because my goal here in bringing up at this workshop on March 13th is put it on our April 24th meeting to go out to public hearing, to hear what people think, what some of their ideas are. I'm not asking Dr. Moore to go out to 52 meetings or anything like that, but putting it on our website to take a look at and to place this on our April 24th meeting just for the public to see, and then we get reviews, comments, concerns at our May meeting. Because again, if that racial equity policy is repealed, I think we need something, as we heard from our community, to bring us all together. So I'm asking for board input at this time. And Dr. Moore, if you want to start with anything, I'd appreciate it.
I'll defer to the board.
Okay. Dr. Posca?
Yeah, so in reviewing this policy, it felt very similar, obviously, to the other policy that we were just voted on potentially removing with some changes in wording. I guess one of the things I was concerned about is that it alludes to and directs itself to CRT and some of these other issues, and in its statements, even though we maybe have taken out certain words. I think the premise is still there. So for one instance, address the root causes and systems, or systemic, basically the verbiage is owing to kind of the older policy, which we were trying to remove. And I think if we wordsmith and make a new policy, I have concerns that we may find out it also is in violation of the law. And I don't know what we're really getting as a benefit from this policy, because we do have these 3 other policies on preventing discrimination and all these other aspects of things. And I think as a district, obviously, we do an amazing job at that. I don't think that we have a big issue in this district with this type of a problem. And I've worked in organizations that, quite frankly, did have problems. So for me personally, I wouldn't try to create a new policy at this time. I think we should, that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Dr. Potts, can you just explain to me what part you're talking about in this policy, just so I'm aware, buddy?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me go to so it's page, I think it was 2. Where was it? So at page 1 at the item B at the bottom of the page, second part of the sentence, which address the root cause and systems, ensure systemic inclusion. The premise, I guess, is that we have a systemic racial issue here. And that's kind of the way it's written, right? And that's the underfinding, the basis of CRT is that there is a systemic issue we have to fix. And I guess I just disagree with that premise.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Barrenborn? Okay,
I
I'm
wanna
sorry.
speak after.
Mr. Barefoot?
You go ahead,
I did. Okay, Ms. Rosario, I'm sorry.
Okay, so there are, I took a look at a lot of the sections that are in here, obviously, and I went through all of our policies, and pretty much every single part that you have in here is captured in an already presented in current policy. We have about 21, I lost track, I think about 18 to 21 policies that we currently have that capture all of this stuff already. I'll start with the improving in your purpose. There's a section there that says improving the performance of all students. We have that captured already in multiple policies, but in the policy titled School Improvement Policy, we also have that in our educational program or program of instruction policy. We have the section on subgroups in Florida includes, for reporting purposes, A, B, C, D, and E, which are students from major racial, ethnic groups, children with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students. We have all of those aspects captured in all of those policies, including our Title I services, including our bullying and harassment, including our standards of ethical conduct, including anti-harassment and recruiting of diverse employment, and I can continue on. We also have a section in here that is titled, or that you included, increase achievement and including on-time graduation. We have an entire policy on our graduation rates, or our graduation policy, I should say. We have a thing here on achievement gaps, eliminating systemic achievement gaps. When we talked about the achievement gap work group a year or two ago, and that was approved, the achievement group at that time, what I said was, if we were to have any policy moving forward, we should have a general policy of closing the achievement gap in general. Dr. Moore actually said that we don't need a policy on achievement gaps because the work is already being done and it's captured within our strategic plan. And so that didn't go any further from that point on. So capturing that in policy now would be kind of hypocritical, essentially, of what the superintendent mentioned just about a year ago, or whenever that policy was approved. So moving forward, I'll piggyback off of what Dr. Posca mentioned with regard to systemic, because there is, the idea behind using the word systemic does imply that it is a system-wide, almost as if there is a system-wide purpose or intent to have an achievement gap, or that the achievement gap is not being addressed across the board for everyone, and the effects on the entire system would, in this case, not be addressed because we're not doing the work. And I would completely disagree with that. I think that we are doing a lot of work towards closing the achievement gap. The state of Florida has issued, obviously, as you all know, the new standards, the best standards to address increasing the expectation of what students are learning, and then also implementing the new benchmark assessments to also address some of those issues in terms of closing the achievement gap. So we are working on that already. I have concerns with the fact that we would include current litigation within our policy. I've not seen that ever before. If we get into the precedence of mentioning or crafting policy with current litigation, knowing how litigation works and how fluid litigation can be, I don't know why we would capture that language within any language within our policy. I think as a result of litigation, whatever the final results are after the litigation is over, we can capture the results that are mandated to us, obviously by the judge or by the magistrate, by whomever, and then capture that in policy. But to do that too prematurely seems to be something that we should not go down that road. Plus the mention of this current litigation in terms of meeting unitary status, all of that is already included in our strategic plan. In fact, we have an African American Achievement Plan that captures the work that we were supposed to do to reach unitary status, and we've taken that African American Achievement Plan and we've included it within our strategic plan because that's how important it was to us. So to imply that we are not working towards that end to make a strong stance on not having racism, or to imply that we are not working towards closing these achievement gaps would do an injustice to those who are doing the work day to day in this area. I do also want to mention the family, student, and community engagement section. This section, we have about 4 policies, 3 or 4 policies on parent and family involvement in our school program, one of which is policy 2111. So pretty much everything that is here is already in this one policy. It actually states that the board believes that student learning is more likely to occur when there is an effective partnership between school and students, parents and family, and that, as it mentions here, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, defines certain terms there. In this case, it's defining a parent, but then it goes into stating that this district will cultivate partnerships to build relationships with family, build effective communication, collaborate with the community, involve families, have volunteer opportunities, and then the implementation, of course, is the responsibility of the superintendent to provide a comprehensive plan to engage parents and families for their involvement. So that section is already captured there. There's a section here on leadership that talks about our policies and practices to promote equal opportunities. Obviously, we have all of our non-discrimination policies, our standards of ethical conduct that captures this information in there. We have anti-harassment policy, but we do have a policy specific that addresses both of these, A and B, and that is the recruitment and retention of diverse employment staff, Policy 4120. And it very clearly states the same thing that's here already. The school board recognizes that the district staff should reflect a broad diversity of backgrounds that characterize Indian River County. Diversity in employment at both the school and district level, provide students of all backgrounds and abilities with examples of achievement through education, a diverse workforce, and it goes into talking about that. It talks about the goal of this policy is to maintain a diverse workforce in which the district, through recruitment, hiring, training, promotion, and personnel management practices that are administered in a manner which furthers the principles of equal employment opportunity. And obviously, there are 2 pages there that you can read. So that's captured already in current policy. Teaching and learning, same thing. All of those bullets there are captured in all of these, including our strategic plan as well, and our professional development policy. And the last one, which is implementation and monitoring, is captured throughout, and obviously within the contract of our superintendent, because, and we also have an executive orders policy that captures his responsibility to ensure that all of these, that all of this is executed with this significant opportunity to receive a fair and inclusive, high-quality education. So it's already there. We already have it. One of the takeaways that I had at our last meeting was pretty significant in that the idea of having a policy has to be something that we can work toward. And if we can work toward it, it should be something new, or it should be current policy that we are editing or changing as we go along. But to cherry pick or to piecemeal certain parts of current policy and then create a new one seems to be redundant and futile at the least. I would not support this. We already have it. I spoke with the superintendent, though it is not something legally required. I know that we can create our own policy at any time. That is not of the issue. I think that as he shared, it does place additional work on staff that is not needed when we already have all of these things already captured.
Thank you. Mr. Barefoot?
This is one of those things, I can go either way. Mrs. Rosario is right. We have all of this. I do think that there is an unintended consequence of repealing the policy, and that consequence is there's certain groups that relate to these words that other groups don't like in policy, and they're part of our community as well, and many spoke to that point. I think that the attempt to consolidate 3 policies in particular into one, I mean, I think I made that suggestion. Yes, you can leave it as is, but I think there is some value to end up with one policy covering not all of the points that you mentioned, but the 3 specific policies that were referenced at the last meeting that in effect say what the proposed policy that was being proposed to be revealed said. It neatens it up, but in the process, perhaps there's no question there's redundancy, but hopefully some of the words that some people object to that other people actually take comfort with, and I'm not here to pass judgment on anybody's point of view, there is some benefit to that because it does appeal, some of these words. You hear the word equity, what does that mean? I was in a conversation the other night with a public high school teacher from South Bend, Indiana, and her husband, who is a professor at Notre Dame. So I asked the question, this is the son and daughter of some friends of ours, and I asked the question, when you hear these words, what do you mean? And I mean, I had a headache trying to really understand the response to these words, because to some people, these words are really important, and to other people, less so. So I guess my preference would be that we continue to try and figure out if we can get one policy that covers all the critical points. On the other hand, it's not something that I'm prepared to fall on my sword for. And there's no question it would require more work, and Dr. Jones, I applaud you for making an effort to get to that point. It's a challenge, there's no question. But those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Ms. Berenborg.
Yeah, that's exactly what my statement I wrote, was to applaud you for your effort of putting forward something, because when this came up before, I spoke to the superintendent. He said, "Oh, look in this policy." You know, we brought it, kind of picked it apart, and he said, "This is here in this policy. This is here in this policy. This is here in this policy." But then part of as a board member, a good board member should listen to public input. And when I listened to public input that night, I changed. He asked me, why did I vote that way? And I said, because I listened. The optics of us removing an equity policy in February of all months just was bad. And I understand the timing wasn't good, and you didn't, you know, there wasn't much control over the timing. I get that. But then I started to look at your new policy you put forward. And I started to realize, okay, a lot of the statements in your new policy are in our other policies. Aren't some of the statements covered, for example, family, student, and community engagement, A, on page 2, specifically is in another policy. And then under leadership A, that's in another policy. So I get the fact you're doing that. One thing I wanted to point out is that we passed, is it 2130 was the number of the policy that we passed, and I believe you brought that forward to us about when we were looking at the DSEG order, and when we finally get off the DSEG order, that we're going to all commit to doing these things.
Achievement work group.
Achievement gap
work
policy.
group
Right.
policy.
So in that
Oversight work
policy,
group.
again, here we are creating a policy without Neola's input, which makes me a little nervous because we're going to be back in this boat again. So I do applaud your efforts on this. I totally, you understand, because I voted with you on why I'm very sensitive to this being removed like this instead of changed or adapted, or I appreciate the fact that you're trying to adapt this. What I think we should do is look at that DSEG one, the achievement one, 2130, and say, is there something in there that you would like to take from your policy that you're trying to craft here that's not in another policy that you could adapt to that policy, instead of making a whole nother policy? Adapt the parts that were missing in the cracks and put it there. But making sure that our wording is correct, because I agree with you on systematic, not good. So we need to make sure the wording is correct. We're not taking one group's side over another group's side. We're looking at all our kids equally, and we're making sure that we're following through with the kids that don't get the support at home and what we can help them with. So I think looking at that other policy and saying, what can I take out of this and add to that that's not already somewhere else, might be the key.
All right, just some feedback from your points. We heard several times that night that these, and we just heard it today, these policies are all over. And I think it's important to bring them together. Yes, I do know that some of these are in the policy, but just repealing the racial equity policy, just throwing it out after it had been voted on 5-0 just a couple years ago, sends a terrible message. As far as the mention of the DSEG order, letter A says continue commitment to compliance with the 1967 DSEG order in accomplishment of the goals outlined. I don't think there's anything wrong with that legally. It's just something that we are continuing to do, and I'm on the work group, so I understand that. We're working hard. As far as systemic or race and so forth, we get results from the state by race for test scores. So they are looking at that by race, and so that's something I think that we need to continue to do. I just think it's important that we say to our public we're looking at this. I think it's important that Dr. Moore get this out there and get the input that we need from citizens to see where we need to go. This isn't approving a policy, it's just getting it out for public input so we can hear from everyone. When we talk about the achievement gap policy, I think you're all aware that that goes into effect when we receive unitary status. Why that was so important to me was because many times DSEG orders will be accomplished by the court and then they go on a shelf. And that has been actually documented. Can't remember the exact numbers, but I think 7 of us are under a DSEG order. 26 have never had to deal with one, and the other 36 have received unitary status, or vice versa on the 26-36. So it's something that I think that's very, very important. I understand this is not perfect. I followed protocol to get it to you 7 days ahead of time to take a look at. I think we really need to bring all these policies together into one. So I'm just asking that if we can get input from our public, and then we put it out there for the public April 24th, and then make a decision in May. And that's the one thing I'm asking, you know, to at least get a consensus, or at least 3 board members to say, let's get this out to our public. It could be changed. It could go to 1 page. I think the title's good, safe, respectful, and inclusive education. I think that a lot of components are good, and I know we repeated some things, but what parent looks at every policy on the school board anyway, and how many of them are going to find the different 15 items that need to come together for this? We have up for April 24th repealing the racial equity policy. Can we at least get something on that agenda, and it doesn't have to be this, that says, listen, we're looking at this, and we're trying to bring it all together from the 18 different policies. It's simply what I'm asking. Board feedback.
I guess one question I had, and maybe Dr. Moore can answer this, are there any specific complications with taking our Neola policies and trying to combine them all into one, which could be an issue down the line, and maybe Mrs. Shattuck can comment on that?
Through the chair, I'll take a stab at it, and then Molly could jump in. Neola is designed a certain way. So Neola is the organization that could work for all 67 Florida school districts. I think there's about 35, 40, I'm sure Molly knows the exact number, that use Neola. The intent of Neola is to, on an annual basis, look at the shifts or changes in state statute and provide recommended changes, deletions, additions to policies to ensure that your policies are in fact aligned to state statute. That is a service that the board contracts in order to make sure you're good. It is your responsibility. You are the owner of policy. My previous district did not use Neola. You did? So Neola is something that's new to me. But then again, Miami basically has its own law firm, so they don't have to use Neola. It has been mentioned in the time that I've been here a number of times by a number of different, both current and former board members, that Neola is confusing because, as an example, when Mr. Bass brings items, he's going to, for personnel, there's one policy written for three different audiences surrounding the same statute. So it would be for personnel, it would be for students, it would be for community, but basically the same policy. They organize their policies in a particular way in order to ensure that they remain current and they know exactly where those particular policies are, and they're written to a very specific audience. So I say they have a structure in place that works for them to ensure compliance. Board members have said a number of times, that's confusing. Let's have one policy. And I think the maker of this item has been relatively clear. Yes, it is redundant. She's saying it's redundant because I think the intent is to create a policy that houses all of the information in one particular place. So I think it's redundant by design. Molly, did I say, do you need anything to add? Unlike maybe Ms. Basura, you could, if I said anything wrong, cut me off.
Thank you, through the chair. I concur with all of that, and I think it just goes to the point that some of the board members have been making. It does create some additional work for staff because Neola will only review and provide updates for their own policies. So if we're saying, let's say this is already covered in 8 other policies, and let's say they're Neola policies, and let's say there's some changes made to those Neola policies, they will provide those updates, but it will be up to staff to remember to make corresponding updates to this policy if
Right.
we do a policy that's not a Neola one.
Okay.
And through the chair, we have created that system. So as I referenced at the last board meeting, the policy that's up for repeal, we had not yet created that system. That was the first one that was created above and beyond Neola. So as we went through as shifts in law occurred, they give us what Ms. Dampier refers to as the book. We have a book coming to you, which is the changing of policies based on the last session. That's how long they take. That's another thing. But at the same time, it is additional work. We have created that, the 2 policies that are out for public hearing now. They include language that is straight from policy, I'm sorry, from statute into it.
Right.
And also federal guidelines. So we've created that system. But I want to caution the board, yes, it is additional work for me and staff. But at the end of the day, Neola is going to provide a foundation that would be relevant and legal for all of the districts in which they serve in Florida. You as a board have the local control to say, thank you, Neola, that's good, but we want more. You can't necessarily say we want less, but you can definitely say, for those who elected us, this is what we would like our policy to be. So by no means would I ever say you have to take Neola as being biblical. You have to take that minimum foundation to stay legal, and it's me and Ms. Shattuck's responsibility to make sure is any policy presented to you legal. And as you give your local voice to policy, it is our responsibility to say, yes, that is still legal.
Question, Dr. Moore, was the racial equity policy approved by Neola?
No.
Through the chair, we did not ask Neola to look at it, but we did with our own legal team review that policy, ask for input on the creation of that particular policy. So yes, the assurance is provided to the board when you approved it, that it is in fact something that we can legally do. And
Okay, and so, all right, you answered that question. And even though this would be work, bringing this together, so you would then have to double check with Neola if this new one is approved, correct?
through the chair, no, not necessarily. You have your own lawyer that you work with. Neola is a bunch of well-intended lawyers who actually look at policies and procedures. So you would have an assurance from your lawyer that this is in fact legal.
All right, that's just what I'm asking the board, is to see if we can at least get this out to our public, get it on April 24th hearing, so we can hear from our public and then make a decision in May. Dr. Moore?
Through the chair, I work for the board proper, so I am looking for next steps. Even if individual board members think in polar opposite areas, I still work for the board proper. As I listen to you, as you introduce the item, Madam Chair, I think your intent is to create a policy based on feedback and listening to board members, what they said at the last meeting, in which you're pulling policies together. April 24th is the next convening of this board. I do think you received some good feedback from other board members.
Yes.
That makes me pause and want to say, can we look at those specific items? Dr. Pasca mentioned the issue around systemic racism.
Sure.
That is something that Ms. Barenborg echoed that we could look at. I know your intent in the creation of this policy is is to create something that everybody can get behind. They may be the opportunity to look at that specific issue. Ms. Barenborg also raised the issue of looking at adding on to a current policy versus creating a new one. That was a suggestion. I didn't hear any feedback based on that. Ms. Rosario highlighted the level of redundancy. I don't know if there's some additional feedback that you would like to provide in that, but I think basically that was by design. We would just have to make sure in its final review that there would be no redundancy, fine, additional work, yes, but redundancy, fine, but contradicting information and policy is something that we're going to have to review to make sure that it would not. So the next time the board can take action on this item would be April 24th, but as I listen to 5 board members, I hear some immediate feedback that you could consider in shifting or modifying it, that you can bring it back on the 10th, and then we could still get it to the board on the 24th if that's the desire of the board.
I didn't hear support. I heard
I
4.
didn't,
I
that's what
heard
I'm asking
4 that are not in support of it and 1 that is. So
That's all of my
That's how it
previous
works.
statements
That's the
is
consensus.
basically,
Okay.
I need clear direction.
All right, will you say what you wanted to do one more time, and then I'll ask each board member whether they wanted to move forward.
The only thing that I'm saying is I heard a number of suggestions and recommendations based on the current policy. I just wanted to highlight to the board that you still have another convening where you can workshop this before you take it, if that is the desire of the board, to take it out for public hearing on the 24th. That's what you said you wanted to do. The board convenes again on April 10th.
Right.
And I highlighted some possible recommendations, whether it is to embed some of this into a current policy, whether it is to look at some of the language that is currently available. Can the board are you okay with it being repetitive? We're
that's
giving
the whole
feedback,
point.
but we're not
No.
being explicit in terms of next steps.
Okay, Mr. Barefoot?
We have 3 options. Do nothing, leave it in place. We talked about wordsmithing 2230 as opposed to repealing it. In some respects, that's what you've done. And the third option was to create a new policy while repealing whatever the number is, 2230, that would incorporate all of the key points in the 3 policies that are in effect in place that would say the same thing. All 3 of those choices, get us to the same point. I mean, it's like saying, we want to go to Miami for the weekend. I mean, we can fly, we can take the turnpike, we can take I-95, but they all end up at the same place. We ought to be able to reach a consensus. Personally, I don't see anything wrong with, perhaps, if you're willing, you've already put in a lot of time and effort, taking another stab at this and bring it back on the 10th. But as I said earlier, we've sort of addressed this. My biggest concern, I don't even know if that's the right choice of words, is a number of people spoke fairly strongly at the thought of eliminating some of the words that were in the policy that we would repeal that are important to them. Whether they're important to me is beside the point. The other thing that I think is a concern of mine is that parents don't read policies. But if there was a policy that they might want to read, it would be on this topic. And to have to send them to 3 different policies to get whatever it was they're looking for seems to me to be a fool's errand. So whether it's wordsmithing, the one that we want to repeal, or moving ahead with a consolidated policy, call it, or leaving it the way it is, just repeal the old policy, as I said,
Board members, would you consider allowing me to bring this back for April 10th after listening to the board member comments and rewording it? So bringing this all together and still going back to what citizens said at the last meeting and what it meant to them, would you consider letting me bring this back April 10th so we can take a look at it again? After board member input, and I've got it all down. Dr. Costa?
I don't think it hurts anything if you want to bring it back, but I don't think my position will probably change.
Appreciate it. Ms. Berenborg?
I'd like to do what I suggested, which is take what you think is not in any other policies and just look at a policy we already have, which I understand why we have several different ones. Like you said, some are geared towards students, some are geared towards employees. I get that. So why not look at 2130, which is one we recently brought that I think might be one that you can just tag something in there that we don't already have somewhere else. There's a lot of what you wrote down in there that I could find other places.
Right.
And I get why we want to have one-stop shopping. As I said, that's parental rights bill. They basically took a lot of different statutes and they put it together in one spot so that parents have a one-stop shop to be able to find what their rights are. I get that. And I think it's great. How about same thing for a parent of a child, that might have these concerns? So maybe we look at that policy.
So you're okay with reworking it and looking at 2130?
Look at 2130.
Dr. Pasta, okay. Not sure his mind would change, but he'll take a look at it. Are you okay with reworking?
Yeah, that's, the wordsmithing option. Yep,
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Ms. Rosario?
If you are going to bring to us something that is repeated in other policies, I'm not interested. I'm not going to support that. Our purpose here is to create policy, pass policy, approved policy that is going to be implemented and useful, implemented by the board, by the superintendent and his staff, and obviously our schools and principals and teachers and so on and so forth. And if it's something that is repeated already, that is already in working order, I will not support something that is already repeated. I just won't.
Thank you.
And I also want to just add, I think it's important for us to understand that we have to not create policy or approve policy or support someone else's request for a policy if it's emotionally driven. Our job is not to be emotional, is not to have emotional, make emotional decisions, but to create things that are going to be functional and applicable to the daily operation of the school district that aligns with our vision and our mission, and that is not captured someplace else.
Well, this is not
That's the
emotionally
creation.
driven.
That's the creation of what policy is meant to do and, to be for, to align with statute, to align with our standards, and to drive the work of the district forward.
I just would like to make a comment on that. It's not emotionally driven. It's trying to get it together, listening to the citizens, listening to the district, listening to board members. I simply knew that this just wasn't going to say, okay, we're going to do that. My purpose was to make sure that we have this for our students and that we're here for everyone. So, Dr. Moore, it's 4-1 that I can take a look at this and bring it back April 10th. I'll do my best. Again, the purpose here is just to make sure that we are good to go with all of our students. Okay, any other agenda items?
No
Mr.
more additional items, but I did want to provide a quick update. Mr. Bass has, and then
sorry.
Ms. Becerra is going to provide a quick update on where we are with our review of books.
On the extended day program, I misunderstood. It is an increase. I apologize for not saying that earlier. I misunderstood the pricing from the previous year. $20 more a week from the previous years, and it has not gone up for several years, so we are having an increase this year.
For the students?
To attend the extended summer camp program.
But I thought that part of the monies that we received from the grants, having the grant funding, the millions of dollars that we got from grant funding would help to cover some of the new programming for summer program, for day camp. I forget the name.
That's covering those programs, but this is the standalone program that we fund through their.
What standalone program? I'm confused now.
It's funded based on the parents paying for the care.
So can't we supplement? Why do parents have to pay in this economy with all of the increases? I mean, eggs are close to $10 a dozen. It's crazy. Some people are like, I'm not going to eat eggs anymore. But to increase the amount, no, I mean, it's probably cheaper to get your own chicken. But I mean, and now we're saying if you have multiple children times $20 more each child, I mean, that's a burden on them for the summer. Can we supplement that somehow?
I think all the other money is tied up in all the other
Well, let's
programs.
release it. Let's untie money somewhere. I mean, this is important.
Through the chair, this is a paid-for summer program, very similar to a typical summer camp that we just run within our school
Right.
system. The dollars that have been allocated for us are to be used during the confines of the school system. So I don't think we could charge people a price and then offset, because then that would be, if it was completely free, which we offer a great deal of free services with those dollars to offset what was the learning loss, all part of the application which we've submitted.
I'm sorry, we did that last year. We supplemented last year. We talked about this last year, and we offered a super big discount for staff that we were going to supplement for them and their children, so that if you have a summer school teacher who has children who wants to attend the program, they were initially going to pay full price. But instead, we agreed last year that we would supplement whatever the difference would be so that those children can go in at a discounted rate. We did it again with the student amount. Last year, the students' amount, I think you all were requesting a little bit higher than what we gave them last year, what we were charging last year per kid, and that came down last year, so why not do it again? I mean,
Can I ask a question?
The staff is discounted to $60 per week.
Yes.
And
Right.
then it is, if your child attends one of the summer camps and then comes to the second half of the day, it's $30.
I know, and last year was going to be full price. But
So
we
we're offering that
changed
again this
la-
year, the 60 and 30.
I know, but last year you originally came with a request to have those teachers pay full price. This board gave direction that no, at least I know I did, let's discount it for teachers who are working the summer program.
And we did it
And-
again
and
this year.
if there is, I know. So what I'm saying is, if we did it in the past and we're doing it again now, why can't we also do it for the students?
Okay. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You said it's $20 increase a week. How many hours is it a week?
8. Well, 8, they're paying $3 an hour,
That's what I'm asking.
basically.
So
$3
what's-
an hour.
That's the increase?
No.
What's the increase would be
The increase is
per hour?
$20, so 20 hours, so what is that? 8 to 4, 50 cents an hour?
Okay. I have no problem with it.
And this is for everybody. I went to Fresh Market yesterday and I got eggs for $3.99 a dozen. True. I'm thinking, it's because they have been $8.99, $9.99. I was very surprised.
Everybody
but-
go to Fresh Market for your eggs.
But I agree with, I looked at all the costs, I looked at the assistance we're giving employees, which means a lot. And again, I know what daycare is with the grandson, so it's a pretty good deal.
It's a great deal.
And then our last update, I think, Dr. Shafter, you'll provide?
Okay, go ahead. Through the chair, so we wanted to update you on weeding. So a really pivotal state release of that training happened January 30th, when our media specialists were able to come together and make sense of what that meant for them. Shortly after that, we immediately began assisting our schools with the first steps for weeding middle and high schools. We ran preliminary reports in Follett, which is our inventory system, just to see which books had not been circulated at all, 0 checkouts. The additional layer that everyone has to understand is Follett gives checkouts by staff and student combined as one. So we wanted to say first screening, materials with 0 checkouts. Then we gave those reports to our middle and high school spaces and said, this is just your starting point, because we couldn't combine the publish or the purchase or the acquisition year in that report. Something could have had 0 circulations because it was just acquired in the past 2 to 3 years. So after giving them that initial report, they have been weeding, knowing that the spaces cannot be closed down. It would be one thing to say you shut your doors and you weed, but they still need to be in service of the students on their campus. So they are actively weeding at the middle and high school spaces. With the new guidance, we're working on a decision tree for schools for purchasing, because that is the next question. It would not be fiscally responsible to purchase while weeding. In this instance, they need to make sure the space is secure and ready to receive materials, and then they can purchase. And in accordance with House Bill 1467, those purchases will come to you for board approval as a separate line item. Questions?
Any questions or comments?
If it's at the leisure of the board, Ms. Dampier does have some updates based on our conversation. It might behoove us just to quickly go through those to save us some time.
Thank you, Ms. Dampier.
Then we'll provide copies of this to the board as soon as she reviews them.
Through the chair, these are the recommended changes from a few minutes ago, hot off the press. We are making these changes, and they're making copies right now. I just had to approve everything. Based on Ms. Barrenborn, she's pointed out on page 15, which in our document, it was the level 1 about the teacher.
Right, 2 interventions.
Yeah. So what we did there, to make it consistent, we eliminated that, because really that is more of a level 2 where they're getting a referral. Level 1 are the minor infractions in the classroom. However, they could take a phone away from a kid if they needed to, but they would be writing a referral. So we took that out to be consistent, because level 2 would be more of a referral, and the administrators will act on that. Also, there were suggestions on page 20 to add a link to the Hope Scholarship. That has been highlighted on page 20. We're making that change. We've highlighted the Hope Scholarship. All these changes are highlighted in yellow, as well as we put that the Hope Scholarship definition is in the glossary. It also has been added to the glossary as well. You should be receiving copies as soon as possible. And then on page 34, Mrs. Rosario asked that we add for the cyberbullying, to add cell phones, and we added those to both locations, the top and bottom of page 34, which was instead where it says computer networks, we added cell phones there, and then we added it through cell phones at the bottom as well, where it listed computer, et cetera.
When you're ready. Page 43.
Page 43.
Okay.
We still have changes going on page 43. We added this language here, which was suggested. We already had for the first offense, a student shall be given a verbal warning, and the parent or guardian will be contacted to bring a change of clothes. We added that verbiage. A student will be assigned a lunch detention if a change of clothes is unable to be provided.
So they go back to the classroom with the same clothes on?
No, there's a lunch detention assigned to the student.
What if it happens at 8 in the morning?
They don't go back to class.
So they've lost their whole morning of school?
If the parent doesn't bring a change, is unable to bring a change of clothes, that's what's the recommendation that we had.
Yeah, I brought up the 1, 2, 3, 4, but board members didn't provide further.
Oh, so we're not changing that?
No, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying I said I have some suggestions, but then it didn't get any we didn't get any feedback, so I think what was just mentioned now is interesting. Why then have them, if they can't get a change of clothes, then they should go straight to Aspire?
My thought is they don't go back to the classroom with the same change of clothes, because we're sending the message that it's
Yeah.
okay.
Instead of lunch detention, they just go straight to Aspire.
Okay, we can add that, but again, you
Unless
want to
the
limit
parent-
Aspire, so.
Well, if,
I do, for repeated.
Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
We modify the language so once the student is sent to the office of being out of dress code, he or she doesn't return until there can be appropriate
Thank you.
That's fine.
That's all I'm asking for.
That's fine.
Wait, doesn't return where?
The classroom.
But you have to put them somewhere.
It's just at a spot.
So my goal is to have children in class, so we will contact the parents if you can bring them. When I was the principal, I had a
Closet.
drawer full of clothes that
Yes.
were appropriate.
Yes.
I did too.
Here you go. So when dad gets here, I need you in the classroom.
And we have page 47, which Ms. Barrenford mentioned. We went and pulled the policy, and the policy says students should have no expectation of, it was used privacy, but in our policy, it says confidentiality, so we changed it to what it states in our policy.
Okay, as long as we're covered, you
Yes,
know, because
yes.
I can see where some
It's in the
parent could
policy.
be upset with that.
It
Okay.
is in the policy. And that's policy 5136. We actually added that to the end of the sentence so it can be referenced.
Do parents sign this still when
The
at the
code-
beginning of the year, they sign a form saying that I
Electronically.
understand these are the rules?
Yes.
Okay,
Electronically, it goes through a process.
okay.
Page 51, it was also added under cyberbullying, up under the definition, we added cell phones up under each area that we made changes. That was Ms. Rosario who asked for that change. And then we added on page 53, the Hope Scholarship definition along with the link.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is that it, Dr. Moore?
Oh, wait.
I just wanted to, did you look at page 20? Did you include the definition of cyber or adding the personal cell phones to page 20? Because I didn't hear you say page 20. Let me go there. Page 20?
Yes, that's added as a part of the definition of cyberbullying.
Okay.
We'll also update that with the harassment, the bullying and harassment policy. We'll know
Yep.
to update that at the same time.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right, thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned, 3:31. Thank you. Start again at 5:30.